we have yet to conquer are mainly ones of perception and, of course, finding the money to do it. Is our future underground? The short answer is that in the face of climate change and overcrowding, we really don't have a choice but to start digging deep. This inquiry was presented by me, Tanya Beckett, produced by Ravi Naik, researched by Matt Toulson, and edited by Tara McDermott. The programme was mixed by Craig Boardman.
That was the BBC's The Inquiry. I'm Jeff.
Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage & Spence in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app, and as well streaming on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Lots to come here on the program. First, though, we're going to check in with Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk for a look at what she's working on this morning. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, a Nova Scotia truck driver who lost his foot to a flesh-eating disease is now suing a Winnipeg doctor. Christopher Miners was diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis and had his foot amputated in Nova Scotia, but the 54-year-old says that could have been avoided had he received better care when he was in Winnipeg. We'll hear about that. As well, Animal Justice and the Winnipeg Humane Society are calling for an end to the calf scramble and sheep wrangling at the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair. The fair gets going on Monday. The events see kids chase, wrestle, and then tie the animals. The groups say they cause stress and hurt the animals. We'll hear more in our next local news coming up at 6:30.
All right, looking forward to it. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Abby Adiemi is our director today. May McKillop on the controls. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. There is lots to come here on the program. We're going to hear more about the first day of spring, astronomically, that is, that's arrived. The CBC's Manjula Selvaraja has a suggestion for your spring to-do list, an app cleanup. Stay tuned for that conversation. Also ahead, 4 years after the world shut down because of COVID-19, what have we learned about the virus since those early days? House Dr. Raj Bardwas joins us. In our 7 o'clock half hour of the program, our mental health columnist Mark Hennick joins us with a look at the mental health benefits of gardening. And in our last half hour of the program, as you've been hearing on this show this week, there has been a lot of concerns raised about kids in care and those who care for them. We're going to hear from Manitoba's Minister of Families, Nahani Fontaine, to talk more about that and what she thinks of the police chief's comments about violent crimes being committed by young people in children and family services care. That's coming up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. I'm Faith Fundal. World Report is next.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Evelyn Brochu is working on being funny in another language. She's one of the stars of the new Quebecois-American film French Girl. Evelyn's mainly done dramatic roles in English, but she'll be here to talk about switching to comedy for this film and how she learned English watching The Fresh Prince.
Wait a minute, I'm getting the names. This guy, this is Carlton, this is Hillary. Okay, I got this.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcast.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. There are more questions about the motion the House of Commons passed on Canada's response to the Israel-Hamas war. It was amended just minutes before the vote. And we're still trying to find out exactly the meaning of one key sticking point, the export of military goods to Israel. The CBC's Janice McGregor joins me now from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, this was an NDP motion, but there were some big amendments from the Liberals. Where did they land on defense exports?
The government's claimed for months that it hasn't issued any new export permits, particularly for lethal military technologies, since October 7th. But organizations that track shipments from Canadian companies like Project Plowshares believe that, in fact, nearly 30 million in exports for Israel's military have continued to flow because the export control system doesn't actually distinguish between lethal and non-lethal permits, particularly for dual-use technologies like circuit boards, antenna systems, even vehicles. Activists have protested across Canada outside the private companies that continue to profit from these exports. The wording change that they hammered out at the last minute on Monday night, New Democrats think should shut this down. But could the government now be liable for breaking private contracts? MP Heather McPherson said last night on Power and Politics it would be worth the risk of being sued if that means saving civilian lives.
There is no scenario in which I believe Canadians are interested in hearing a story about liability issues against 13,000 killed children.
If Israel's military operation is ultimately found to be at risk of perpetuating a genocide against Palestinians, activists continue to argue that continuing any kind of defense exports makes Canada complicit.
There are some members of the Liberal caucus who did not support this motion, even with the amendments. Why is that?
Well, MPs like Anthony Housefather have been pleading with colleagues to understand why it was still very harmful to Israel's cause.
Essentially what we're saying is that Iran will continue to ship weapons to Hamas and Hezbollah in the north, and those terrorist organizations will fire on Israel. And if everybody followed what that motion suggested that Canada do, Israel would have no ability to respond.
Housefather, of course, one of 3 Liberals who voted no on Monday night. He says he's continuing to reflect on what to do next.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. A federal appeals court has put a controversial Texas law on hold. SB 4 would allow law enforcement to arrest anyone they suspect of being in the state illegally. It would also give judges the power to deport people to Mexico despite their nationalities. The bill was given the go-ahead by the Supreme Court yesterday, but last night it was stopped. The CBC's Alex Pineda joins me now from Washington. Alex, what is going on here?
This law imposes state penalties for entering the U.S. illegally. It's aimed at migrants who right now can walk into the U.S., declare asylum, then stay in the U.S. for years while they fight their case. Millions are doing just that. So Texas says, we'll deal with this ourselves. The law allows police in Texas to demand people's immigration papers. If the police see evidence that a person entered illegally, they can be jailed for 6 months for a first offense and up to 20 years for a second offense. Then when they're out of prison, the police have to take them back to the border and deport them. The federal government says you can't do that. And Texas says, well, the Constitution gives us, the state, special powers, war-like powers if we're being invaded. And that's being litigated since last year. So what happened yesterday in the span of a few hours was this judicial back and forth. The Supreme Court allowed the law to take effect, at least for now, while the case is being fought in lower courts. Then suddenly, late last night, a federal appeals court reimposed a different injunction delaying the law. The bottom line is, as of right now, the law is on pause.
So what's next?
This morning, an appeals court will hear new oral arguments about what to do with the current injunction, while that case continues to be fought on its substance, probably back to the Supreme Court. In the meantime, there's uncertainty for millions of people. In a dissenting opinion yesterday, some of the Supreme Court's liberal justices said this law means chaos and crisis in immigration enforcement, that it upends a balance of power that existed for a century between the federal and state governments. Meanwhile, Mexico's not happy. It responded to yesterday's news saying it's not going to accept deportations from Texas, that Mexico deals with federal law, not state law.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The CBC's Alex Pineda in Washington. South Sudan is experiencing an intense heat wave. In Juba, temperatures are expected to hit 42 degrees today, and they could go even higher in the coming days. The government has canceled school for 2 weeks. Many classrooms don't have air conditioning. Anthony Moy Alamin is a school principal in Juba.
Yeah, it is very, very severe. It's affecting the learning environment severe because in the class, this time you cannot sit in the class. Children are sweating in the class. Teachers also sweating.
One of his teachers says the area used to be cooler, trees used to provide shade, but South Sudan is dealing with ongoing violence and refugees from Sudan, and a lot of those trees have been cut down and used as firewood. Canada's legal cannabis industry is looking for more ways to draw in customers. Sales across the country have plateaued. So licensed producers and retailers want provinces to help by loosening restrictions on collaborations. The CBC's Mike Crawley explains.
With Canada's legal cannabis market still relatively new, customers' shopping habits are still evolving.
We don't have fans of brands as of yet.
Shakir Tayabali runs the independent retail cannabis collective, representing more than 750 pot shops across Canada.
Most people that walk into an alcohol store typically know what they want to buy before they walk in. whereas in a cannabis retail store, that isn't the same.
All provinces but Saskatchewan restrict direct financial relationships between cannabis retailers and producers. It means they can't make deals to hold in-store promotional events, such as sampling or special displays. The industry is pushing provinces to change that. Keenan Pascal is CEO of Token Naturals, a licensed producer in Edmonton.
Allow us to have those same store relationships that, a Budweiser could have with a liquor store. That's really what we're looking for.
Alberta's cannabis regulator is reviewing that province's retail rules, including in-store promotions. An official told CBC News the agency will look at possible policy changes in the coming months. Meanwhile, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce is asking Doug Ford's government to lift its ban on producers and retailers collaborating. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Unhappiness is a growing concern amongst young people in Canada and the United States. The annual World Happiness Report shows Canada slipped from 13th to 15th place. And for the first time, the U.S. has dropped out of the top 20 spots. Researchers say it's due to a big drop in the sense of well-being for those under the age of 30. Nordic nations like Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden all took the top happiness spots. Afghanistan and Lebanon hold the bottom two. The annual report looks at 143 countries and territories. It asks people to evaluate their lives on a scale of 0 to 10. So you're stuck in the airport, your flight's not happening as planned, and you're getting no help from the desk. Do you go public with your frustration on social media? Some people have found it is a good way to get a company's attention, but scammers are increasingly using social media to target frustrated travelers. Peter Cowan has that story.
Joanne Galarno tweeted out her frustration when her flight home to St. John's was delayed. She got lots of replies of people wanting to help, claiming to be with Air Canada.
I was social media aware enough to look at their profiles and realize that even though they had the Air Canada logo, they had, saying that they were supervisors, that they didn't have any followers. So that triggered some alarm bells for me.
Airlines like Air Canada, WestJet, and Porter often do reach out to frustrated customers to help resolve travel troubles. But now, scammers are doing it too. Galarno knew the profiles were fake, but she was curious. After giving her booking reference and name, the scammers found her phone number and told her to install an international money transfer app to collect her compensation in Kenyan shillings. She worries that travelers who are less savvy might follow through.
When you have flight cancellations and you have these stressful situations, individuals are just willing to, have anyone help them that they can.
The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre says it doesn't have reports of people losing money through this type of scam, but it says social media is now involved in 75% of the scams reported to them. Spokesperson Jeff Horncastle says stressed out travelers are vulnerable.
So automatically fraudsters are going to try to capitalize on that situation.
Air Canada says it's aware of the issue and the company reports fake accounts. It says customers should make sure they're only interacting with its verified account. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report at cbcnews.ca on our main page. Kyle Bax has the second most read story at cbcnews.ca on the reasons behind why sales are cooling of electric vehicles. I'm Marcia Young.
Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Bundal here in Studio 15 at Portagen Spence. In for Marcy Marcusa, this is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. We're going to speak with Dalia Awati of the charity Save the Children about what she's hearing from inside Gaza about the catastrophic humanitarian situation for children there. Also, the first day of spring is here astronomically, that is. And this year, the CBC's Manjula Selvarajah has a question for your spring to-do list, an app cleanup. First, though, we're going to dive into the history of gossip, rumors, and the royal family. It's coming up here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. And I should say hello to the folks watching on CBC Television, CBC Gem, and hello to the folks streaming on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Our streaming producer, Brad Lilly's on the controls there. May McKillop is on the controls here on the radio side. Abby Adeyemi is our director. Heather Wells is at our CBC Winnipeg local news desk, joining us now as well with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg woman who lives with chronic illness is calling on the province to reduce ER wait times and fix healthcare staffing shortages. Shauna Forrester Smith started a petition after a 3-day stay at Grace Hospital, which she describes as awful. We'll hear her story coming up. And the province says fuel trucks have already started moving gas to Winnipeg after a pipeline shut down in Gretna. The Imperial Oil line was shut down Friday after inspections by workers raised concerns about a strain on a portion of that line. We'll hear about supply management coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
It's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Back here in studio, Abby Adeyemi is here for a look at a whole bunch of things.
Good morning. I made that sound. You know why I was just I don't know why I did that, but
you know what? It wakes up your face.
Yeah, it just
your
wakes
mouth.
the face, it stretches it and everything.
Sure does.
Do I say happy spring day to you?
I mean, technically, it was 10:06 last night when the spring equinox was. So I guess it's happy spring. Just forget about the weather.
It came in, but I don't think it feels like spring.
It doesn't feel
I
like
think
it, no.
it's feeling like more like when we're getting to the mid part of fall, and you start pulling out the sweater. It's still sweater weather. It's still keep yourself warm weather. It's still frostbite weather.
It's cold.
It's actually the first day of spring, but spring is still not feeling like spring right now. It's a brisk -14 outside in Winnipeg under clear skies. It's chilly out there, so make sure you bundle up before starting your day if you're going to be one of those making a transition from one boss to another. It's important you prepare yourself for that. Today we can expect mainly sunny skies, then there's going to be a gradual transition into a mix of sun and clouds as the day progresses. We'll be seeing lots of winds today, actually, because of the wind direction from the northwest, then becoming light later in the afternoon. Now, despite the sunshine, temperatures will remain quite low with a high of -9 degrees. But with the wind chill this morning, it might even feel colder, so be prepared for a chilly one. The wind chill value is expected to reach -25 this morning, and then it's going to improve during the lunch period. In the night, we should anticipate partly cloudy skies to roll in. Then it's going to clear up later, close to midnight, and the wind will then go calm and temperatures will drop to a chilly -20 degrees. So if you're heading out tonight, like if you're one of those that love late night drives or just want to go stare at the sky, please don't forget to bundle up. Right now, Winnipeg, we're waking up to -14 degrees. And Faith, did you know that today's World Happiness Day?
Oh my goodness. I did not know.
Anything to be happy about.
Yep, I'm okay with that.
I'm okay with that. I think I'm just happy from inside.
Yeah.
Just that it's spring.
I think so too.
Anyway, if you see anything in traffic, let us know. 788-3093.
Coming up to 15 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. Gossip around the royal family, especially Catherine, Princess of Wales, have been rampant lately. But it's not entirely surprising to one author and royal historian. I spoke with Carolyn Harris yesterday on Up to Speed. Let's talk about this gossip that has been lately regarding Kate Middleton. Break down this timeline for us. What do you know?
Yes, what we've seen is that Catherine appeared in public at Christmas, joining the royal family at Sandringham for church, and then she went into hospital for planned abdominal surgery. Further specifics were not provided by the palace, but the public was told she would be away from performing public duties until at least Easter weekend. So there has been this very long period of Kate out of the public eye, but during that period we have seen paparazzi photos appearing on TMZ of Kate in the car with her mother. We have seen most recently The Sun in the UK publishing footage of William and Kate Kate at the farmer's market near Windsor. And most famously, we have the British Mother's Day photo of Kate and her children, where there's evidence that the photo was altered and it was pulled by the press. So there have been many members of the public who've been coming up with their own theories about Kate's health, about her absence from public life, about the issues with the photos, sometimes conflating events that don't have a great deal to do with one another. And because of social media and hashtags, these rumors are able to spread around the world very quickly, whereas it used to take much longer for rumors about the royal family to spread beyond royal court circles.
And it's interesting because there has been more focus on Kate after her surgery than, of course, on King Charles after his. What do you make of how folks have been focusing in that way?
Well, King Charles III stepped back from some of his public duties in order to undergo cancer treatment, but he has provided regular updates regarding the work he's doing and his health. We don't know the precise kind of cancer that he has, but we know that he has cancer and that he is being treated for that. Whereas what we're seeing with Catherine is there's been no additional details as to what that abdominal surgery might have been about. And so as a result, people are projecting all sorts of different ideas. Sometimes observers are looking at their own medical histories or that of their families and projecting ideas. We've also seen regular updates from the king where he's opening get well cards, or he's meeting with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, or he's video conferencing with Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. He recorded a message for Commonwealth Day. So King Charles III is dealing with cancer at the moment, but he's been a lot more visible than Catherine has been. So we don't see the same kind of rumors, though there was a rumor over the weekend that spread that he had passed away, which was very quickly quashed, as today King Charles III is meeting with Korean War veterans.
It does make the conversation around does the public have a right to know about their health and their well-being might make sense for King Charles, but what about for Princess Catherine? What are you hearing from folks around? Is this something that is any of our business?
Well, with modern celebrity culture, many people have become very accustomed to knowing a lot about the daily lives of famous people. But of course, members of the royal family are not conventional celebrities. That King Charles III personifies the state as a constitutional monarch in the United Kingdom, Canada, and 13 other Commonwealth realms. And with William and Catherine, they've been very protective of their privacy, both in terms of raising their children and in terms of health issues. So whereas King Charles III is more open about his thoughts and feelings on a variety of subjects, before he became king, the public knew what King Charles III thought about everything from architecture to organic farming. William and Catherine have been quite reticent to put too much of themselves in the public eye. And the question arises, what is the right balance? If you keep giving the public more information, does that simply raise the bar in terms of what the public wants to know? But if not enough information is provided, it allows for all of these rumors to spread, as there are few concrete facts for the public to hold on to. So there's a bigger debate that's taking place here about public figures and what they owe the wider world about their personal life in terms of what they should be saying about their children, about their health, about their daily lives.
If you look historically about how rumors and gossip have played a role in how the royal family is seen, are you surprised with what we're seeing now with Kate Middleton?
Well, I'm not surprised that rumors are spreading, as when we go back centuries, there's always been this fascination with what's going on behind palace doors. The diplomatic correspondence in King Henry VIII's reign noted that Anne Boleyn had said that she was having a great craving for apples. And so diplomats wondered, was that a coded way of letting the royal court know that she was with child? And she was indeed expecting the future Queen Elizabeth I. More recently, when Queen Victoria went into seclusion following the death of her husband, Prince Albert, in 1861. At first, the public was sympathetic. She'd lost her husband, the father of her 9 children, and this was an absolutely shattering event for the Queen. But as the months and the years passed, and Queen Victoria wasn't even appearing to open Parliament most of the time, the public began to wonder, is she suffering from the mental health issues that had been experienced by her grandfather, King George III? What was going on with her Highland servant, John Brown, as she was spending a lot of time in Scotland and not as much time in London? The difference in the 21st century is with social media, rumors can spread globally very quickly, and there's this expectation of seeing royalty in public a lot of the time.
Carolyn Harris is an author, historian, and royal commentator. I spoke with her on Up to Speed yesterday. She was in Toronto.
Your local news at your fingertips.
CBC News has a local news app made for your phone or tablet.
So don't waste time scrolling for the local stories you want. Just download the app to get the information that matters to you, when it happens,
and how you want it.
Another way to get your local news. The CBC News app. Download it today.
22 minutes after 6 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. It is now a race against time to get food supplies into Gaza. The United Nations is warning that people trapped in the Strip are perilously close to famine, and children are suffering severely. That with no imminent end to fighting between Israel and Hamas, there is no sign of a ceasefire as well. Dalia Al-Akati is head of humanitarian affairs for Save the Children Canada, a charity and international aid agency. Dalia, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
How would you describe the extent of hunger among children in Gaza right now?
The conditions for hunger in Gaza, and particularly amongst children, are miserable. They're horrible. Essentially, almost all children in Gaza under the age of 2 are in severe food poverty, meaning that they've eaten 2 or fewer food groups in the last 24 hours. In northern Gaza, the situation is even more dire. 1 in 6 children are acutely malnourished, and 50% of the population, or over 50% of the population of northern Gaza are experiencing catastrophic levels of food insecurity. In southern Gaza, almost half the population is expected to face famine-like conditions by July in the worst-case scenario.
Your colleagues on the ground there and around you, what do they make of what they're seeing and what we can do about it?
So they're telling us, or Save the Children staff in Gaza are telling us that there are severe shortages of food and aid that's reaching them. They're unable to find, basic items like flour. And even when food is found, it's often not affordable, so it's coming at exorbitant prices when it's available. They're telling us that children are starving. They're telling us that it is a struggle for them and their families, and they're feeling a lot of frustration and despair in securing, essential items, basic food and clean water for their families, and watching their communities experience that has been incredibly difficult for them as well.
What is your sense of what is happening to the food aid that international agencies and governments are trying to send in?
Humanitarian aid is still lined up at the land borders waiting for delivery into Gaza. Since the ICJ decision, the daily number of trucks entering Gaza has dropped by more than a third, and the situation in northern Gaza is even more challenging. So we've seen over the past few weeks alternate methods of aid delivery, and we find that they're unsafe, costly, and inefficient, but they're also a distraction from critical solutions to save children's lives and families in Gaza.
Do you have a sense of what might be concrete solutions to getting aid inside Gaza now?
Absolutely. A full reopening of all the borders. There's trucks lined up merely a few miles away from where children are starving to death. And without an adequate flow of aid which meets the current humanitarian needs, without the entry of humanitarian personnel, and without the necessary conditions to allow for aid delivery, a meaningful response in Gaza is impossible. And so we need a full reopening of crossings. We need unfettered humanitarian access. A definitive ceasefire is really the only way to save lives. And we need the international community to act now on ensuring a definitive ceasefire alongside safe and unfettered access for a massive scale-up of humanitarian response.
Can you see any other option outside of a ceasefire to allow that safe and unfettered access?
Well, so international humanitarian law ensures protections for civilians. It stipulates conditions around not using humanitarian aid as a weapon of war. And while humanitarian access is an important part of a ceasefire, these essentially the law of wars should apply in any case. And so unfettered humanitarian access is absolutely critical, but for it to be really functional, a ceasefire is necessary.
Dalia, I appreciate your work, and thanks for making time today. Take good care.
Thank you.
Dalia Akati is head of humanitarian affairs for Save the Children Canada. Out of Winnipeg, that was Field Guide with Style. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, everywhere on the CBC Listen app, and of course, streaming live on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Lots to come in our next half hour. It has been 4 years after the world shut down because of COVID-19. We're going to have more on what we've learned about the virus since those early days. It's coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. In Winnipeg this afternoon. We're headed to a high today of -9. It will be warmer tomorrow. A supply chain professor says the shutdown of a pipeline in southern Manitoba shows systems in place to monitor safety are working. Imperial Oil shut down its pipeline to Gretna, from Gretna to Winnipeg on Friday after an inspection identified a strain in the line. The province says trucks started moving fuel to Winnipeg yesterday afternoon as a workaround. Robert Parsons at the Asper School of Business says the shutdown shows the monitoring system is working the way it's supposed to, and doing maintenance now, he says, prevents the possibility of major issues like leaks in the future.
Being concerned and being proactive is really important in this because we do not want nor need a leak of this kind of material. So we need to protect it because we need it. We need to protect it because if it gets out in the wrong place, it causes a lot of damage.
The company says repairs could take up to 3 months. Parsons adds the longer the shutdown goes on, the more likely drivers are to see an impact in prices at the pumps. A Winnipeg woman has started a petition to improve health care in Manitoba after a recent stay at Grace Hospital. Shauna Forrester Smith lives with chronic illness. She was taken to the Grace with a life-threatening infection. She says she stayed 3 days in a crammed emergency department before going back to Deer Lodge Centre where she lives. Forrester Smith says she was stuck in the ER because there were no available hospital beds.
There were too many patients, and there just wasn't enough time, and there wasn't enough staff, and the ER was just completely overwhelmed. And I had never seen anything like that or experienced anything like that or had care that was that unsafe.
A WHR spokesperson says it shares some of her concerns. The health authority says it is adding more acute care beds and allied health staff to allow for patient discharges 7 days a week. A Nova Scotia truck driver who lost his foot to a flesh-eating disease is now suing a Winnipeg doctor. Christopher Miners was diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis and had his foot amputated in Nova Scotia. But the 54-year-old says that could have been avoided had he received better care in Winnipeg. Miners stopped at Seven Oaks Hospital during a drive across the country in 2022. He alleges negligence by a doctor at that hospital caused the loss of his right foot. He is now suing for damages like loss of income, costs of care, and loss of homemaking capacity. None of the allegations have been tested in court. Animal activists want calf and sheep scrambles at Brandon's Winter Fair cancelled. Animal Justice and the Winnipeg Humane Society say the events put animals at risk of injury and cause them stress. The scrambles involve kids chasing, tackling, and tying the animals. Mark Humphreys is general manager of the Provincial Exhibition of Manitoba, the group that runs the Winter Fair. As of now, those events are still planned. Humphreys says these events are a chance for people to learn about agriculture.
Each year we evaluate every part of the fair. We look at it, from outside and in, and we listen to our base, which of course is the agricultural community, and the agricultural community are saying that these events, we need them to stay.
The Royal Manitoba Winter Fair starts in Brandon on Monday. Brian Mulrooney spends his final hours lying in state in Ottawa. Between 9 this morning and 1 this afternoon, well-wishers can view the casket of the former Prime Minister at the Sir John A. Macdonald Building opposite Parliament Hill. Hundreds of people, including current and former politicians, streamed through the ballroom yesterday to pay their respects. Scandinavian countries continue to lead the world when it comes to happiness. The annual World Happiness Report shows people in Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden are the happiest. But when it comes to young people, both Canada and the U.S. are sliding on the scale of happiness. Canada ranked 15. That is down from 13th last year. Jan-Emmanuel Deneuve is an editor of that report.
Wealth does matter, but especially also how wealth is distributed. So in Finland, Denmark, and the other Scandinavian countries, you'll find that wealth is way more evenly distributed. So more people benefit from the wealth that's being generated in these countries. And then also each one supports a welfare state that provides psychological stability.
The United States dropped from 15th place to 23rd in the happiness report. Well, go big or go home. The Jets took it to New York last night, beating the Rangers 4-2, and it was a big night for Mark Scheifele with his 8th career hat trick. Here's what it sounded like.
Shoots it, knocked down, Scheifele scores! Terrific hands from Scheifele. And look at Scheifele, knocking away, he's got a break. Mark Scheifele alone scores! A thing of beauty from Mark Scheifele. Scheifele, little juke towards the net, and he scores! Hat-trick goal into an empty net from Mark Scheifele.
Mark Shifley on TSN. Interim head coach Scott Arniel says Shifley is an elite player.
Certainly he's underrated, and I think that he just he plays now. I think this year he's having such a great year at both ends of the rink without the puck as well, and I think that's 9 straight 20-goal years. So he's in elite company, and you know what, we know what he's about, and we know what he does for our hockey team and how special he can be.
Also with a huge performance, goalie Connor Hellebuck making 40 saves. Next up, Winnipeg heads to New Jersey to face the Devils tomorrow night. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
That's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Magandang umaga, good morning Manitoba. Faith Wundal here. In Studio 15 at Portage and Spence, this is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. And I'm sitting in for Marcy Marcusa, who is going to, she's going to explain. Hi, Marcy.
Hi, I popped in. I'm going to Ashern and Ericsdale this morning.
It's going to be a busy next day and a half or so.
It is, next couple days. And I'll talk about that in a moment. First, can I just take a moment here because Abby's in studio too. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Marcy.
Is this what happens when I'm gone? Look how awesome this is. Look at there's plants in here.
Right.
Faith set the ambiance in the studio. I love that.
The only thing is,
why am I not doing that?
If you were watching on our
TV.
YouTube stream, just whenever the camera comes to me, it looks like there's a little tiny pot plant. That's growing right over here. It's not a pot plant.
It does look like a pot plant. Yeah, it looks like cannabis. It's beautiful. You know what's good, though? From my angle, you look like you're kind of in a forest. But if you didn't like the answer I gave, you could hide behind the plant.
So Ashern.
Yes, Ashern. Let's get back on topic here. So we are going for Communities in Focus. People have probably heard us do these initiatives around Manitoba. Basically, it's just CBC getting out. So we've been to a number of different communities, and today we're going to be heading out to Ashern and Ericsdale around Lake Manitoba. Last week we were in St. Laurent, and St. Laurent is also on the shores of Lake Manitoba. This is a little bit further up the way, up Highway 6. So we'll be broadcasting from there. Now, this is only part of the initiative. Nadia Kidwai, producer, Bryce Hoy, the reporter in the area this week. So they're really there setting up office hours, and they are there to listen to people and to just hear, if you're in the area, what stories should we be sharing and telling. Our part for the morning show is really just to come on in and have a big community breakfast, do a live broadcast from the Ashern Chicken Chef is our location tomorrow morning, and they switch their hours around to welcome us. They've told the community, so we'll be sharing stories tomorrow on the morning show about the area. So I'm really looking forward to it, and if you're in the area listening, please come and see us.
Bring back food.
I will try to bring back food. Do you know what's funny? I love Manitobans. The first thing that happened when I mentioned I was going to this area, what do you think, Abby? What do you think people were recommending?
Let's see.
Where to buy food.
Where to buy food.
Yeah, 100%. People were like, go to the butcher and get pepperoni in St. Laurent, which I forgot to do.
There you go.
So we hope we see you there for Communities in Focus. We've got some really interesting stories, including one that's intriguing, and I'm going to eat 30 seconds more of your time.
Okay.
Do you guys know what Mogi's Cabin is?
No. Creepy.
Mogi's Cabin. Okay. One of the first escaped convicts from Stony Mountain hid in the woods around Ericsdale for 10 and a half months in 1960-61. So we're going to have that story. That's just a little intriguing thing to tell you about. And of course, we'll be covering healthcare, community amalgamation, all kinds of different things.
Okay.
So
safe travels.
Thank you very much.
Keep your seat warm.
Thank you. Myself and Corey Funk are going, and I'll just slide back behind your money plant and get out of here.
It's a money plant, not a pot plant. Marcy Marcusa here, usually on the morning show. And of course, I'm filling in for her as they head to Ashern today in Ericsdale. Abby Adiemi, you got to talk about the weather before we speak with
Yeah,
Chris
I'll
Lee.
just wish them a safe travels with wish them good weather, but I know it's going to be chilly, so that's just what they need to remember. Winnipeg is currently crispy at minus 14 degrees. It's clear outside. Throughout the day, expect a mix of sun and cloud with temperatures hovering around minus 9. Heading west to Brandon. Brandon is seeing minus 15 right now. Thompson is at minus 31. Churchill is chill at minus 30 degrees. We have a risk of frostbite in that area because it feels like minus 46. That means frostbite in a minute. Moving south to Dauphin, it's currently minus 16. Gimli's at minus 16 also. Steinbach at 14 and Morris at 13.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi, our studio director here on the program. May McKillop is on the controls. Christy Ramlakan. Let's try that one more time. Christy Ramlakan from the CBC National Business Desk is joining us now. Hello.
Hi, good morning, Faith.
Let's talk about the numbers from StatsCan. Showing Canada's inflation might be or is slowing. What else can you tell us?
Yes. So last month, annual inflation cooled to 2.8%, and it was at 2.9% in January. So economists had been expecting the rate to go up with the increase in gas prices, but it didn't. So a little good news there for us. Now, StatsCan says the dip was thanks to Canadians paying less for cell and internet services and food purchased from stores compared to last year. So people who signed up for a new cell phone plan last month paid almost 27% less. And prices for groceries grew at a slower pace, with fresh fruit, processed meat, and fish prices even declining. Now, February was the first month since October of 2021 that grocery prices increased at a slower rate than headline inflation. But grocery prices are still up at 2.4%, and they do remain elevated. I mean, from 2021 to this year, prices for food purchased from stores increased almost 22%. So even though, it's slowing down, prices are just much more than people, were paying a few years ago. Now, offsetting all of the price easing was gas, which actually rose in price. And rent and mortgage interest costs also continue to drive inflation. So for more on this, here's Sherry Cooper, who is the chief economist at Dominion Lending Center.
I think there's a chance that we could even see a rate cut at the next meeting in April. But that's just a chance. I think for sure in June, barring something unforeseen, we will see rate cuts begin.
So the Bank of Canada's next interest rate decision is April 10th.
It's the big question, of course. We'll see. There's a Canadian company putting itself up for sale. What's behind the decision?
Well, Gildan Activewear says its board has decided to put the company up for sale following a review by a special committee. So the Montreal-based clothing company says it's received a non-binding expression of interest from a potential buyer, but it didn't name the buyer. And the committee says it's in the best interest of the company now to contact other potential bidders to try to maximize the value of any potential transaction. So for more on this story, here's retail analyst Doug Stevens, who is the founder of Retail Profit.
Right now in the apparel market, with brands like Shein and Temu and other massive marketplaces infiltrating the North American market and selling T-shirts for, in some cases, a few dollars. And that's it. It makes for just a tremendously perilous environment. So not shocked.
Now, Gildan has also been embroiled in a battle between its top stockholders. The board fired the co-founder and CEO in December. And while executives say he had no credible long-term strategy and had lost the board's trust, a group of shareholders has actually been calling for his return.
There's an unlikely social media site that's planning to add games to its platform. This is fascinating. Who are we talking about?
Yeah, so this is LinkedIn. But remember, it's owned by Microsoft, which of course is well-versed in the gaming space with Xbox. So the company is looking for people to spend more time on the site with puzzle games. So think things like Wordle. And it appears LinkedIn is experimenting with player scores being organized by places of work, with companies getting ranked by those scores. So for more on this, here's Carmi Levy, who is a tech analyst.
This is an interesting pivot by LinkedIn because, of course, it is known as the social media platform for professionals. It's a lot more serious than anything you will ever encounter on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok. It's known as the sober alternative. So to inject games into it, into the same platform that people are using to look for a job or share professional advice, is kind of a bit of a surprising extension or shift for the brand.
So LinkedIn hasn't released a launch date yet, though. But, it's not the first try at new features for it. It's tried out online education and professional development, a publishing operation, and tools for creators and influencers.
Just before you go, Crystalie, what are the markets looking like so far this morning?
In Europe, markets are lower as investors await the latest monetary policy decision from the U.S. Federal Reserve. So Germany is up, the UK and France are both down. In Asia, markets are on the rise. Japan, Shanghai, and Hong Kong are all up, Oil is down $1.10 to $82.37 US per barrel. Gold is down $3.80 to $2,155.80 US per ounce. And the dollar is down almost 0.2 cents to 73.52 cents US.
Have a good morning, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take good care.
Thanks, Faith.
Christelle Remlekan at the CBC National Business Desk. 14 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. A vast space cluttered with some things you use too much and others you barely touch. It's how the CBC's Manjula Silvaraja describes our smartphones and their apps. And now that spring is here, she says it is time to clean up that app sprawl.
Have you ever felt app fatigue? I did when I found out the small hair salon in a little strip mall near my home had its own. There is an app for just about everything. According to a report by the analytics firm Data.ai, in 2023, Canadians spent more than 3.8 billion Canadian dollars on apps. Female users in Canada lean towards wellness ones, and male users towards sports-related ones.
Certain apps are much more trendier at that period of time. We see our friends or colleagues playing with it or doing something with it. We download it. We get bored of it.
Hussein Ghaffar owns The Tech Fixer, a repair shop for electronic gadgets in downtown Toronto.
So after a few months, there's something more or newer that's out there. We download that. So that's how we keep piling things up. And we never delete the older ones, right, that we're not using.
Both the App Store and Google Play have millions of options you can download, and that number will keep going up now that creators can make apps with AI and app building software without knowing how to code. It's also easy to get new apps. A free trial pulls us in, and it gets on our phones with just a few clicks. Hussein Ghaffar says our love for the latest shiny thing and hoarding of old favorites opens us up to privacy issues.
I have a lot of customers come in. They ask me, how can I protect my privacy? I said, once you buy a smartphone, you're signing up for it. Any app you download, you are compromising your own privacy.
Canadians spend an average of nearly 4 hours every day on their phones. That's according to the same Data.ai report titled The State of Mobile 2024. Our mobile devices are now one of the most used spaces in our lives. And so, Helen Yun says they deserve a good spring clean.
I think when you're organized in different areas in your life, it actually improves your confidence.
Yun is a professional organizer. She specializes in the Marie Kondo method of organization and is one of only 6 trainers worldwide who teach the KonMari method to other organizers. Before starting to delete apps haphazardly, Yun suggests reflecting a little.
The first thing is you have to think about what is your ideal life. And when it comes to your phone, I want you to think about what is the purpose of my phone? What do I want this tool to help me do?
She says upon reflection, people realize that what they do with their phones is contrary to the way that they want to live their lives.
Maybe they are somebody that really wants to take all their spare time to learn new languages or to travel, but they're playing Candy Crush, right? So start there. Start with the vision and think about what do I want this phone to help me do? And that's going to help you decide which app I need to keep.
That report from the CBC's Manjula Silvaraja here on CBC Radio 1. Just about 10 minutes before 7 o'clock here. 4 years ago, the world as we knew changed it. Now, almost 60,000 Canadians have died of COVID-19. The CBC's Marcy Marcusa spoke with House Doctor Dr. Raj Bhardwaj.
So what kinds of things have we learned about this virus in the past 4 years?
Oh, so much. So many things. We've learned how it's transmitted, how it gets into your body, what it does when it gets there. So we've learned that the virus hangs in the air like smoke, and although it gets into your body through your mouth and nose and lungs, it does most of its damage elsewhere in your body. But because we breathe it in, that's where we generally feel symptoms. That's where your immune system first encounters it and starts to fight it. But the virus attacks your blood vessels. So it gets into all your organs. It gets into your brain, for example, and it can give you cognitive deficits. Recent research points to signs that a mild infection can lead to the equivalent of 7 years of brain aging, not to mention headaches and sleep problems and mental health disorders. We've learned that there's an increased risk of having a stroke or a heart attack or a blood clot for up to a year after infection, probably because the virus invades the lining of the blood vessels and causes inflammation. And we've learned about long COVID, when an acute infection leads to a chronic disease, and it does that frequently. According to numbers from StatsCan, as of June 2023, about 19% of Canadian adults who caught COVID reported experiencing symptoms longer than 3 months. That's about 3.5 million people. And almost half of those folks said that they had not seen any improvement in symptoms over time. And we're still having fatigue and cognitive decline and breathing problems. And on top of that, we've learned that reinfection increases your risk of complications rather than decreasing it. The good news is that we've learned about vaccination. We've learned that vaccination lowers the risk of a lot of those things, not to zero, but it cuts the risk.
So when the mRNA vaccines were first given emergency approval and then they rolled out to the public in early 2021, some people were concerned that they were experimental. What have we learned about their safety and effects?
You know, we've learned a lot just from the number of doses given. I mean, in Canada alone, there have been almost 106 million doses of COVID vaccines given up to February 25th of this year. And we know that there are going to be risks with any vaccine, you know, whether it's allergic reactions or local swelling or feeling crummy for a day or two. And there are some very, very rare serious risks. But the alternative is risking infection, which is a much greater risk. Have you heard about this German man who received over 200 doses of mRNA vaccine?
I haven't.
Yeah, so his case was actually written up in Lancet Infectious Diseases. It was covered by a few news sites in early March. So this 62-year-old man, he ended up getting 217 shots, mRNA vaccine shots, over 29 months for what he cited as private reasons. And these were confirmed vaccinations, not just him telling a tale. So scientists asked him if they could study him, if they could do blood tests and saliva tests and all sorts of things like that, and he agreed. And so they found a bunch of things. First of all, they found that he had never caught COVID and that there were no adverse effects on this one man, even though he had 217 documented mRNA vaccine shots. Now, interestingly, he also wasn't sort of super immune compared to people who had just the regular number of shots. But he didn't have any weird gaps in his immunity. He didn't have any weird DNA mutations. You know, nothing bad happened to him. Now, that's just the case of one man who's hyper-vaccinated, which nobody recommends. But given all of the experience worldwide with these vaccines, we can say that these mRNA vaccines are incredibly safe. And if you're still a little bit suspect of mRNA vaccines, okay, remember that there's traditional non-mRNA vaccines available like Novavax as well. They're fully approved. They work just as well, maybe even better. Unfortunately, they're just not as available as people might like.
What other kinds of progress have we made, do you think?
You know, I think progress happens, right? I mean, the virus has mutated from the original strain. It is still mutating and changing unpredictably. Vaccines have had a huge amount of progress and have had a huge effect, saving millions of lives in the first, 8 months alone. Rapid tests have really changed the scene by, putting the power to test and self-diagnose into people's hands. Remember when we had to line up for tests and in our cars and stuff like that? Medications to treat COVID have really changed the scene as well, especially for people who are at most risk. Although a lot of experts still think that we're underusing the medications that we have, and it is still hard to access the medications that we do have. And again, I think that the one piece of progress we haven't made is, either people are choosing to put it out of their mind or forgotten, or maybe just haven't become aware of, is that COVID is not just a respiratory disease. The virus gets everywhere. It has the potential to trigger a real decline in your health by affecting so many different organs.
Now, it has been, as we all know, a full 4 years. Should COVID still be top of mind for people?
I think there's sort of two approaches to this question. I think for the average person, I think that COVID doesn't really have to be top of mind all the time, but it should at least be a factor in your decision making and your behaviors to some degree. Simple things like stay up to date on your vaccines. Only about 16% of Canadians have taken advantage of the updated XBB booster that came out last fall, and it's been shown to provide more robust immunity to the strains that are circulating these days. Choosing to do things in fresh air is another simple one. We care so much about clean water, as we should, but for the most part, we ignore the chance to choose clean air. Cleaner air in classrooms and workplaces, restaurants, and our homes. We can't completely stop the spread of the virus. It's out there, but we can minimize it. Judicious mask wearing, staying away from others when you're sick. That's still all important. The other side of this, though, is public health. For public health, I believe that absolutely COVID should still be top of mind for policymakers, and I'm surprised that it's not. And I'm not talking about mask mandates or closing schools or something like that. I mean, we're way past that. But mandating masks in hospitals and nursing homes, mandating cleaner air in nursing homes and in classrooms, at least, I mean, that sort of stuff is doable. And even just broad public health messaging and education so that people are aware of the risk of repeat COVID infections and aware of the availability and limitations and benefits of the treatments. That could make a huge difference in years to come in terms of future disability and economic resilience and the quality of life for Canadians. And I think that's what public health is all about. And it needs to stay focused on that. All of us do. Healthcare professionals, air quality engineers, scientists of all kinds need to stay focused on that to keep studying, keep improving our approach into what will be and is now a major player in human health.
That is House Dr. Raj Bhardwaj speaking with Information Radio host Marcy Marcusa earlier. We're at 2.5 minutes before 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Over to our CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Heather Wells joining us with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg woman who lives with chronic illness is calling on the province to reduce ER wait times and fix healthcare staffing shortages. Shauna Forrester-Smith started a petition after a 3-day stay at Grace Hospital, a stay she describes as awful. Animal Justice and the Winnipeg Humane Society are calling for an end to the calf scramble and sheep wrangling at the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair. The events see kids chase, wrestle, and tie the animals. The groups say they cause stress and hurt the animals. We'll hear from the general manager of the Provincial Exhibition of Manitoba coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
It's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Abby Ediemi is our director here on the program. May McKillop, our technician. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer on the CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Goodbye to the folks watching on CBC Television and CBC Gem. You can always go to YouTube to see us. Of course, hello as well to the folks listening on the CBC Listen app. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. Still to come in our next hour of the program, a close call with coyotes. We're going to hear from a Winnipegger who came across a pack of coyotes while walking his 2 dogs. You've been hearing about this as well on your CBC Winnipeg News. Stay tuned for that. Still to come after World Report. Stay tuned.
Of the irreverent history podcast, The Secret Life of Canada.
We've covered everything from the history behind the iconic Bay blanket to why blackface is still a thing and how all our histories can be traced back to our relationship with water.
Oh, you forgot about the controversial debate over which dessert is the most Canadian, the butter tart or the Nanaimo bar.
Yes, I did forget that. That was intense.
The Secret Life of Canada. Available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. There are more questions about the motion the House of Commons passed on Canada's response to the Israel-Hamas war. It was amended just minutes before the vote. And we're still trying to clarify the language around one key sticking point, the export of military goods to Israel. The CBC's Janice McGregor joins me from our parliamentary bureau. And Janice, this was an NDP motion, but there were some big amendments from the Liberals. Where did they land on defense exports?
The government's claimed for months that it hasn't issued any new export permits, particularly for lethal military technologies, since October 7th. But organizations that track shipments from Canadian companies like Project Plowshares believe that, in fact, nearly $30 million in exports for Israel's military have continued to flow because the export control system doesn't actually distinguish between lethal and non-lethal permits, particularly for dual-use technologies like circuit boards, antenna systems, even vehicles. Activists have protested across Canada outside the private companies that continue to profit from these exports. The wording change that they hammered out at the last minute on Monday night, New Democrats think, should shut this down. But could the government now be liable for breaking private contracts? MP Heather McPherson said last night on Power and Politics it would be worth the risk of being sued if that means saving civilian lives.
There is no scenario in which I believe Canadians are interested in hearing a story about liability issues against 13,000 killed children.
If Israel's military operation is ultimately found to be at risk of perpetuating a genocide against Palestinians, activists continue to argue that continuing any kind of defense exports makes Canada complicit.
There are some members of the Liberal caucus who did not support this motion, even with the amendments. Why is that?
Well, MPs like Anthony Housefather have been pleading with colleagues to understand why it was still very harmful to Israel's cause.
Essentially what we're saying is that Iran will continue to ship weapons to Hamas and Hezbollah in the north, and those terrorist organizations will fire on Israel. And if everybody followed what that motion suggested that Canada do, Israel would have no ability to respond.
Housefather, of course, one of 3 Liberals who voted no on Monday night. He says he's continuing to reflect on what to do next.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. Today is Budget Day in Newfoundland and Labrador, but protesters are blocking government employees, media and politicians from entering the provincial legislature. Fish harvesters want the government to open markets to outside buyers. As it stands, they can only sell their catches to buyers inside the province at a union-negotiated price. Police on horseback have been pushing back the protesters, and the public is being warned to expect traffic delays in the area. A lawsuit settlement in the United States is getting attention from Canadian real estate experts. A group representing U.S. realtors agreed to pay out millions of dollars. It was accused of artificially inflating real estate commissions, and it agreed to a change in practice that should mean cost savings for home sellers. As Yasmin Hanea reports, there are similar suits playing out in Canadian courts.
It's going to revolutionize the practice of real estate agency.
That's how University of British Columbia professor Tom Davidoff describes the U.S. settlement. The National Association of Realtors has agreed to pay $418 million and eliminate the standard 6% sales commission.
The hope here is that sellers will wind up paying less in commissions when they sell their homes.
The U.S. group required selling agents to make a commission offer to the agent representing the buyer up front. Critics say the rule is anti-competitive, causing sellers to pay an elevated rate of commission and can lead to higher housing prices for buyers. Walter Melanson is with Moncton real estate company Property Guys.
The argument is by doing it that way, it falsely inflates the amount that the seller will actually be required to pay in the end.
Now, the Canadian Real Estate Association and dozens of local brokerages are facing a proposed class action lawsuit alleging a conspiracy between brokers to boost commissions, which the CREA denies. Garth Myers is with the Toronto law firm behind the suit. He says the U.S. settlement strengthens his case.
We think that the consequence of our lawsuit will mean more money in the pocket of home sellers.
And he hopes it can reduce the cost of homes for people hoping to buy as Canada continues to grapple with a housing crisis. The case has been filed in federal court. A hearing date to certify the proposed class action has not been set. Yasmin Hanea, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Coast Guard is searching the waters off southwestern Japan. A chemical tanker has capsized in rough weather there. 7 crew members have been pronounced dead. 2 have been rescued, and 2 others are still missing. The tanker was carrying nearly 900 tons of acrylic acid. Officials are still determining what the environmental response is that might be needed. Several automakers are pulling back on their plans to expand their production of electric vehicles. Sales are slow, and drivers who have EVs are concerned about where they can charge up. CBC business reporter Kyle Bax has that story.
Sales are still growing, but the rate of growth is what's slowing down.
The state of the EV market is a focus at this year's CERA Week in Texas. It's one of the world's largest energy summits. Amy Stanley is with Toyota North America. She says range anxiety used to be a big worry for drivers, but now she says car buyers are more focused on charging.
There's certainly some examination happening in the U.S. about should there be some regulation about reliability to make the charging network at least comparable to the gasoline network.
Mike Worth is chief executive of Chevron.
Look, EVs are great. They are a terrific piece of technology. They don't work for everybody.
Governments have high ambitions to get more electric vehicles on the road, he says, but reality is now setting in.
We have to deal with the world as it is, not as it was modeled on a spreadsheet.
Some automakers are now rolling out more battery-powered SUVs. Those models in particular are expected to help move more vehicles off the lot. Deanne Millison is a senior director at Ford. She says last year, EV sales at the automaker jumped 80%. This year, the increase is expected to be a smaller 30%. Nevertheless,
if we want to be in the future in the automaking business, we need to make EVs. We need to understand this transition.
In the end, Millison says it's all about choice. That's why dealer lots will still feature many gas-powered vehicles for years to come. Kyle Bax, CBC News, Houston.
The London clinic where Catherine, Princess of Wales, had her abdominal surgery is investigating a data breach. Staff there reportedly tried to access her private medical records. Now the agency that oversees British data protection is investigating. Anna Cunningham has the latest from London.
It's the latest in a series of troubles for Kensington Palace and the Princess of Wales, who spent 2 weeks at the London clinic following surgery in January. The clinic has been trusted by the royals for their medical needs for generations, but details of Kate's procedure were kept private, unlike King Charles, who went public with his cancer diagnosis after treatment at the same clinic. Now, at least one member of the clinic's staff has reportedly been caught trying to access the princess's medical notes without consent. Such a data breach would be a criminal offence.
There is a line, as far as I'm concerned, where privacy should be absolutely sacrosanct.
Simon Lewis is a former communications secretary to the late Queen. He believes the royals are entitled to their privacy on medical issues.
There was a survey yesterday that showed, I think, 50% of the people surveyed had seen some of the conspiracy theories about the Princess of Wales's health. So there's a vortex. I know this happened when she was in hospital, but what we're still seeing is this unacceptable, I think, level of interest in her health.
Kensington Palace has said that this is a matter for the clinic, which has opened its own investigation. Anna Cunningham for CBC News, London.
Scandinavian countries continue to lead the world when it comes to happiness. The annual World Happiness Report shows that people in Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden are the most content. Report editor Jan Emmanuel Deneve says there is one key factor.
Wealth does matter, but especially also how wealth is distributed. So in Finland, Denmark, and the other Scandinavian countries, you'll find that wealth is way more evenly distributed. So more people benefit from the wealth that's being generated in these countries. And then also each one supports a welfare state that provides psychological stability.
When it comes to young people, Canada is on a sliding scale of happiness. It ranked 15th, down from 13th last year. And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, happily, at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
I see what you did there, Marcia. Magandang umaga. Good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fundal here in Studio 15 at Portage and Spence in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. Coming up on the program, as you've been hearing, we'll hear more about a woman's recent experience at the Grace Hospital and how it has prompted her to start a Blue Ribbon campaign. Also coming up, a Winnipeg man says you should be on the lookout for coyotes, especially while walking your dogs. First, though, you've probably noticed how the prices at the pump have gone up. As you've also been hearing, Imperial Oil has shut down one of its pipelines that delivers fuel to the Winnipeg market. We're going to hear about the supply and demand issues and other issues associated with those increasing prices coming up here on the program. Stay tuned. First, though, over to our CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Heather Wells joining us now. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a Nova Scotia truck driver who lost his foot to a flesh-eating disease is now suing a Winnipeg doctor. Christopher Miners was diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis and had his foot amputated in Nova Scotia. The 54-year-old says that could have been avoided had he received better care while he was driving through Winnipeg and stopped at the Seven Oaks Hospital. And Animal Justice and the Winnipeg Humane Society are calling for an end to the calf scramble and sheep wrangling at the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair. Those events see kids chase, wrestle, and then tie the animals. The groups say they cause stress and hurt the animals. We're going to hear from the general manager of the Provincial Exhibition of Manitoba coming up in our next local news at 7:30.
All right, talk to you soon.
Okay.
It's Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Joni Nicolou also there, and Megan Ketchison. Here in Studio 15 and Control Room 15, May McKillop on the controls. Abby Adeyemi is our studio director. And by the way, hello to the folks watching us from the CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies is our streaming producer. Say hello to him. You can't see him, though, but he's back there. Abby.
That's all I'm going to say.
I like that.
The mercury is just doing its thing. It's now minus 14 again. It's clear outside, but it's minus 14.
That's what happens, right?
No, did I say minus 14? No, it's dropped to minus 15.
Oh, my goodness.
It was minus 14 earlier. Now it's dropped to minus 15. Chilly out there. Just make sure you bundle up before stepping out. Looking at what the day has in store for us. Today, we expect mainly sunny skies, then a gradual transition into a mix of sun and clouds as the day progresses. It's going to be windy coming from the northwest, and it's going to get light during your lunch period. Now, despite the sun we'll be seeing today, temperatures will remain quite low, and the high we will see for today will be minus 4 degrees. With the wind chill, it might feel even colder, so be prepared for a chilly one. The chill values are expected to reach minus 25 this morning, then improving in the afternoon. But put in mind, we're expecting a low of a high of minus 9 degrees today. Once again, Winnipeg, we are at minus 15 degrees. Nothing in traffic big, except for something I noted here. Southbound McGregor between Smithfield and Macadam. There's a roadwork happening there. So you might want to plan your commute if you're going towards that axis. If you see anything in traffic, let us know. 788-3093.
Coming up to 14 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. Gas prices are creeping up. This morning, some stations show regular gasoline selling for $1.39.9. Yesterday on Up to Speed, I spoke with supply chain expert Robert Parsons. Folks have already started to see fuel prices at gas stations go up from $1.33.9 from yesterday to, $1.39.9 today. Might this be related to the supply-demand issue and how this might be more expensive for Imperial Oil to transport by truck and train?
Well, there's an interesting point in this, Faith. I want to tell you.
Two things, right?
Yeah, there's a number of things. Of course, it will go up a little bit. Now, one thing for everyone to keep in mind, it's a 3-month period. The Premier did relieve the gas tax or the fuel tax. That will continue on until just after that 3 months. So there's a little bit of buffer in there that we're dealing with. One of the key things, it's an interesting thing to note, Manitoba, even though we don't have any refineries or anything here, we have literally the third least expensive products, petroleum products at the pumps.
Robert Parsons, sessional instructor in the Supply Chain Management Department at the University of Manitoba, on Up to Speed yesterday. Dan McTagg is president of Canadians for Affordable Energy and founder of Gas Wizard. Dan joins us on the show now. Good morning.
Good morning, Faith. Good to be here.
Do you think consumers should accept that because supply and demand dictates the market and Imperial Oil's shutdown of its fuel pipeline means a change in the way it'll deliver to its clients? Is that something we ought to accept, do you think?
Well, I think we ought to accept something on the fundamentals and maybe put that back in perspective. I did speak to your colleague here a day or so ago about what would likely happen, is that there would be an increase, but the increase had nothing to do with the disruption and more to do with the fact that Winnipeg gas bars at charging $1.33 were only earning about 4 cents a liter, turning on their pumps, and it's a little bit more expensive than that. I don't really know, or it doesn't really matter where you are in the city. You have to pay for your staff, you have to pay for your overhead, your taxes, etc. Normally, gas stations need 8 to 10 cents a liter to operate in big cities. Right now, they were operating at 4 cents a liter. So the timing, which I anticipated in not just this interview, but several interviews, I said it would probably go up a few cents, which it did, to reflect now what is a 10 or 11 cent retail margin. Basically, that means that the price increase was related to abysmally low retail margins. And I'm not here to defend or excuse gas stations. They don't do themselves any favor by doing this, and the timing is certainly awful. But you have to look at that, because that's how I do the price predictions for the country. If you look at the wholesale price of gasoline, for the purposes of today, 97.8 cents a liter, 14.31 for the carbon tax, 10 for the federal, HST, or rather GST included, brings you to 122.11, and then you add the retail margin to give you the 139.9, which I'm seeing at many stations in Winnipeg yesterday afternoon and this morning.
The messaging continues to be "Don't panic buy." There is enough fuel.
Yeah, big time.
Is it fair to call it a manageable inconvenience, as one expert described it?
Well, I managed to say that again right here 48 hours ago. I think you were the first ones to call me, actually, on Monday morning. I said, look, don't panic. It is not, there's really a logistics issue, getting it from Gretna to Winnipeg. That's not to mention the other players that can still bring their product right into Winnipeg. It's going to be an inconvenience, and I think the provincial role isn't so much, hey, we dropped the gas tax. It's that, hey, we're going to allow more trucks on the road, despite the winter turning into spring at some point, to keep the flow going. So I think that's where the province has been very helpful, and it's not going to lead to a whole lot of significant disruption. It'll be inconvenient. As I mentioned, the gas stations from time to time may run out of fuel for several hours, but be replenished. And they will be on what's called phase allocation, which basically means rather than getting 40,000 liters in one drop-off, they're going to get 10,000. They're going to have to manage that, and they're going to have to probably, in some instances, say to customers, look, you can only get 75 liters. We're not going to allow you to buy anymore. There's no need for hoarding, and certainly no need for panic.
Imperial Oil told CBC News that the issue with the pipeline was caught during a routine inspection earlier this year, saying it made a decision to shut it down because it felt it was the right time to do maintenance. Also saying that with continuous inspections, maintenance and repairs, there's no kind of end life for a pipeline. Do you think regulations need to be changed, particularly given the impact of what shutting down a pipeline looks like to the economy and to how people, feel?
Well, I think we take for granted what's in the ground. What's in the ground tends to drive our economy. And the fact the company was proactive, had enough time to establish and to find alternatives, I think is very helpful. We can have that discussion about whether we like it or not. I tend to believe that without it, you'd shut down your economy. Farmers would have no diesel. Your jets wouldn't operate out of the Winnipeg airport. And, of course, consumers would have a hard time going from point A to point B unless they're downtown. My hometown, downtown Winnipeg.
What else do you think needs to happen to ensure, say, a stable and reliable energy supply? Because we're also told, because of alternative energy sources and of course, technologies, those things have helped mitigate the impact of this disruption here in Winnipeg and Manitoba.
The beauty of the country, and I'm putting on my old hat when I worked public relations for Toyota Canada. I mean, we have a diversity of options in terms of transportation. not just public transit in large cities, but outside we don't, not necessarily, depending on the size. But we do have, hybrids to electric vehicles to internal combustion engines. I should point out, though, that something that I think we really need to focus on, and that's demand for oil products and petroleum products isn't ending with the rise of the EV or hybrids. What we're seeing, in fact, is an increase in demand, and you're going to get a pretty good sample of that today with the Department of Energy U.S. Weekly Petroleum Report, as well as what's happening internationally. When the International Energy Agency, very much an organization promoting green alternatives, is saying that demand is up 1-2% every year for the foreseeable future, you kind of have to know that maybe we're slowing down and finding alternatives here in North America and in the Western OECD countries, but other countries are just starting to build their economies, and they're going to do so on fossil fuels. I think the question, though, is whether or not we want to do it with coal or whether we want to do it with clean natural gas or hydrogen or whatever we can provide.
Dan, thanks for waking up and answering our calls.
It's okay. Anything's my old hometown. I'm proud of being staying out from Winnipeg. So a lot of people sort of scratch their head and say, no, he's not from there. But look it up. It's on my bio.
Take good care and talk to you soon.
Thanks, Faith. Bye-bye.
Dan McTagg is president of Canadians for Affordable Energy and also founder of Gas Wizard.
Hi, I'm Pia Chattopadhyay, your host of the Sunday Magazine. Every weekend, we help you make sense of our changing world through conversations that cut deep and mine the ideas driving society, politics, and cultures today, with plenty of music, wonder, and fun along the way. So come along and join me for the Sunday Magazine, Sunday mornings at 9:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
Coming up to 22 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. As you've been hearing on World Report, today is International Day of Happiness. Scandinavian countries continue to lead the world when it comes to happiness. The annual World Happiness Report shows that people in Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden are the happiest. But when it comes to young people, both Canada and the U.S. are sliding on the scale of happiness. Canada ranking 15th, down from 13th last year. The U.S. dropping from 15th to 23rd in the past year. Here's a song we thought you might want to listen to. This is Pharrell with Happy.
It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Sunshine, she's here. You can take a break. Because I'm happy. Clap along if you feel like a room without
Pharrell Williams with Happy on this International Happiness Day. Coming up to 26 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. Paul McGowan in for Scott Regier with the Sports Report. Good morning.
Good morning, Faith.
Pretty happy Winnipeg Jets folks as we had that big win over the Rangers yesterday.
Yeah, big win in the sense that, yes, the team had won 2 in a row coming in, but against less than elite competition, maybe even less than competent competition. And we talked yesterday about the fact that the Jets had just 2 wins against playoff teams since January 1st. So a bit of a statement game last night against a team in the Rangers who were sitting in second place in the entire league coming in. And a statement game of sorts from Mark Scheifele. Hat trick for him, including a gorgeous breakaway goal in the second period off a chance that he created at his own blue line.
You know, when anytime there's a breakaway, you gotta find a little extra juice. But you know, I kind of knew Kreider was in a vulnerable spot and didn't know exactly where to go with it, so just took a shot at it, and you know, obviously worked out. You have some thoughts in your brain, but you're kind of, you know, at the mercy of what he's doing. Obviously, if you want to do something and he's covering it, then you're not going to go there. So I just saw he was off his angle a little bit and thought that was a shot.
Rick Bowness, by the way, not on the bench last night. The team saying he had a minor procedure beforehand, expected back soon-ish, it sounds like. Jets back in action tomorrow night when they visit the Devils in New Jersey.
Paul, I know it's a big curling game when my partner is paying attention to the television, like intently. And a pair of tough matchups for Canada yesterday as well, right?
Yeah, Rachel Homan and her rink up against the 2 remaining undefeated teams at the Worlds, and they were perfect yesterday. A win against Italy in the morning, and then the big one. Silvana Tirinzoni and the Swiss, who had not lost even a round-robin game at the last 2 World Championships. That was a run of 42 straight victories for the Swiss. But that streak is over, an 8-5 victory for Canada. Here is Tirinzoni on the end of that impressive win streak.
You never play for something like that. For me, it's almost unbelievable that we were able to win 42 games in a row on that level. It had to come to an end at one point, so we knew that. And they played so great, I think nobody would be able to beat them today. So we tried everything, but not today. So 42 it is.
Tirinzoni says they tried everything, but they also shook after the 8th end and didn't play the final 2, so I don't think that counts as everything. In any event, Canada back in action today, currently in the second end, going into the third end against Japan, up 1-0. They also have Turkey on the schedule later. Rachel Homan and company in very good position over in Sydney.
Just before you go, a statement from the IOC that might impact Canadian athletes. What's going on?
Well, this is concerning the Russian Friendship Games, an idea first floated last year by Russian President Vladimir Putin. It is an Olympic-style event that, in theory, would bring in athletes from around the world. It was conceived of as Russia was battling with the IOC over whether they could participate under their own flag, which, of course, we now know they can't. But yesterday, the IOC issued a statement advising athletes not to attend these Friendship Games. Here's Director of Olympic Solidarity, James McLeod.
As you know, the Olympic Games is not a political event. One of the reasons we wanted to put out a declaration was to make sure that the position of the Olympic movement was very clear vis-a-vis the politicization that is growing and growing across the world. For us, we would believe that an athlete that would take part in there is actually putting him or herself at risk, not only from a doping point of view, but also from a propaganda point of view.
Now, if you're wondering why an athlete would even consider attending these games in Russia, that's a good question. The answer is very simple. Russia plans to dole out $50 million in prize money, which, of course, for an amateur athlete who... some of these athletes might get paid $71,000 for a bronze. You also might make as little as $9,000 for a bronze. So the money aspect might tempt some people, but the IOC, again, advising that athletes do not attend these games in Russia.
Have a good morning, and we'll talk to you again soon. Take good care.
Thanks, Faith.
It's Paul McGowan in for Scott Regier from your CBC National Sports Desk. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. If you see issues, call our commuter line 204-788-3093. More to come after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's the first morning of spring, and it's minus 15 in Winnipeg. We are going to warm up a little bit, a high of minus 9 under a mix of sun and clouds this afternoon. A Winnipeg woman who lives with chronic illness is calling on the province to reduce ER wait times and fix healthcare staffing shortages. Shauna Forrester-Smith started a petition after a 3-day stay at Grace Hospital, a stay she describes as awful. She was taken there just over 2 weeks ago with a life-threatening infection. Forrester-Smith says she was put in the ER because no hospital beds were available.
I was actually admitted, and one of those people who was admitted waiting in the ER for a bed, they didn't know when I was going to get a bed. They couldn't tell me when I was going to get a bed. And that was a huge problem for me.
Forrester-Smith says the ER couldn't provide intravenous nutrition, which she needed. A WRHA spokesperson says it is adding more acute care beds. It's also adding allied health staff to allow for patient discharges 7 days a week. You can hear more on this story coming up in the next half hour right here on Information Radio. The province says fuel trucks have already started moving gas to Winnipeg after that pipeline shut down in Gretna. The Imperial Oil line was shut down on Friday after an inspection by workers raised concerns about a strain in a portion of the line. The government says it's continuing to work with suppliers to maintain gas supply as repairs happen over the next 3 months. Imperial Oil's spokesperson Carrie Scobie says the lines are inspected several times a year.
We've got such a rigorous kind of inspection protocol that we do repair work, maintenance work, all of those kinds of things on a regular basis on our pipelines to make sure that they are, operating safely and reliably and that their integrity is in check.
Scobie says no previous repairs have been done on this specific section of the pipeline. A Nova Scotia truck driver who lost his foot to a flesh-eating disease is now suing a Winnipeg doctor. Christopher Miners was diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis and had his foot amputated in Nova Scotia. But the 54-year-old says that could have been avoided had he received better care in Winnipeg. Miners stopped at Seven Oaks Hospital during a drive across the country in 2022. He alleges negligence by a doctor at the hospital caused the loss of his right foot. He is now suing for damages like loss of income, costs of care, and loss of homemaking capacity. None of the allegations have been tested in court. The U.S. Justice Department has announced charges against a Canadian citizen who lives in China. 58-year-old Klaus Flogby was arrested on Long Island, New York yesterday. He allegedly tried to sell secret battery technology to undercover U.S. agents. The New York Times reports the trade secrets belong to Tesla. The accused is a former employee of Hybar, a Canadian company that made technology used in battery making. Tesla bought that company in 2019. You can hear more national and international news on World Report at 8. Animal Justice and the Winnipeg Humane Society are calling for an end to the calf scramble and sheep wrangling at the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair. Those events see kids chase, wrestle, and then tie the animals' legs. The groups say they cause stress and hurt the animals. The Provincial Exhibition of Manitoba runs the fair. General Manager Mark Humphreys says the kids will not be abusing animals. Humphreys says events like the Barnyard Challenge show people what life on the farm is like. He adds, these accusations hurt agriculture.
What we're trying to do is reestablish that connection between city and rural and educate as we go. One of our things that we love to shout from the rooftops is that we're here, our doors are open, you know where we are, but sadly these always operate from the shadows and come out with guns firing, which is a little sad.
The Winter Fair starts on Monday. As of now, Humphreys says the Barnyard Challenge and sheep wrangling will go ahead. A big win in the Big Apple.
Look at Shifley, knock it away, he's got a break. Mark Shifley alone scores! A thing of beauty from Mark Shifley.
Mark Shifley on a breakaway as the Jets doubled the New York Rangers 4-2 last night. Shifley gets a hat trick, the 8th of his career. Kyle Connor scores his 30th goal of the season. Jets goalie Connor Hellebuck with 40 saves. Interim head coach Scott Arneal says it was a big win.
This is a tough building to win in. They're a real good hockey team, and
they weren't going away. You can see them go right to the very end there. They were keep pushing. So, no, I'm real proud of the guys. They played a real solid game, and we really tried to take, a lot of what they want to do out there. We really wanted, make them play in their end of the rink. I thought for the most part we did that.
Next up, the Jets face the Devils tomorrow night. The Jets now, by the way, are first in the Central Division, along with Colorado, who has played one more game than Winnipeg. You can find more national and international news at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, along with Joni Nicolou and Megan Ketchison. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa here on Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, just about 36 minutes after 7 o'clock. Hello as well to the folks watching on the CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Our streaming producer Brad Lilly is behind the controls. May McKillop is behind the radio controls. Abby Adiemi is our studio director. Happy International Happiness Day.
Happy International Happiness Day to you. It sounds like lots of happy in there.
I love what I love about working with you is you always bring happiness. I always feel nice when I work with you.
And I'm looking at your plants, and it makes me feel happy.
I love putting plants around. It makes it less studio-y.
And talking about spring, I overheard someone yesterday saying, Abby, is it time to bring my flower pots outside? And I'm like,
nope.
Maybe you do it and you tell me what happened after.
It's not going to be helpful.
And then I go, you better not do that because it's just springtime, but it's not really time for you to put the pots outside. Maybe you can start cleaning the space for the patio furniture and your barbecue and, all the fancy stuff you put outside. You can start preparing for that, but not for plants. It's not plant season yet. And also it's not time to start leaving the animals outside. They still want to stay cozy inside. Talking about being cozy inside, it's crisp at -15 in Winnipeg. Partly cloudy skies we see outside. Throughout the day, expect a mix of sun and clouds with the temperature hovering around -9. And that's what we'll be seeing in most parts of the southern parts of the province today. We're going to see a lot of highs of -9. Heading west to Brandon, it's mainly clear with a touch of colder breeze coming your way. You are currently at -16. Today's forecast includes a mix of sun and cloud with a high of -9. Up in Thompson, it's bone chilling at -32. The day promises sunny spells for you folks out there, but the wind chill it's not something to talk about because it's going to feel like -38 this morning, so you need to be cautious of frostbite. Now in Churchill, bundle up tight as it's chilly. It's -30 degrees right now with some ice crystals in the air. Expect a mix of sun and clouds, but the wind chills, it's going to make it feel like -46 this morning. That also means frostbite in minutes, so you need to take care. Moving south to Dauphin, it's currently -17 under clear skies. Today's outlook includes sunny conditions. You're going to get wind chills also dropping to -26 this morning. That's what it feels like. Gimli is actually chilly at -17 with cloudy skies. You look forward to sunny spells throughout the day. The temperature is going to be hovering around -9 later. Steinbach reports a temperature of -15 with cloudy conditions. Expect sunshine, sunny break through the day, and then you get to a high of -8. And finally in Morris, it's chilly at -14. You will see a mix of sun and clouds, and the temperature will drop to around -9. In Winnipeg today, we have a chilly wind to deal with. We have sunshine, and then we have a mix of sun and cloud. And this afternoon, the wind will become light. The high for today is 4 -9. In traffic, nothing to talk about, but if you see anything, 788-3093.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiemi is our studio director here on the program. I'm Faith Fundal. Still to come this half hour, you've been hearing about this on your CBC Winnipeg News. We're also going to hear from a woman's recent experience at the Grace Hospital and how it has prompted her to start a Blue Ribbon campaign. That's still to come in this half hour of the program. First, though, at just about 20 minutes before 8 o'clock, a Winnipegger is warning those who walk along Omens Creek after a close call with coyotes. Brian Grant said he was taking his 2 dogs for a walk in the Brookside Cemetery Monday at around 4 p.m. when he noticed something moving in the distance. He shared his story with the CBC's Josh Crabb.
I'm an older person in the 70s, and so my eyesight is not that great for far thing. But then I realized, no, that's not a dog, that's a coyote, and there's more than one, and they're all looking, and they're starting howling. I figured they might have been even protecting their den. I tried to get my dogs to turn around and go to get out of there, and they saw the coyotes, and of course they pulled on the leashes and right out of my hands, and they started chasing the coyotes. So they all split every which way possible. So my dogs went out of sight, chasing these things, and then I'm calling, whistling. They respond to whistles, and one of them finally comes back with a coyote chasing her, right, and trying to nip at her bum. She does have a bit of a wound, right, but nothing outrageous. They've all had their shots. And then the other one I didn't hear for a long time, and I didn't want to go running into where the coyotes are because then they could turn and attack me. So I stood at the edge of the cemetery and got my other dog, to come back, and finally she came back with another coyote chasing her. Finally, I put my arms up and was screaming like heck, and they backed down, and they just kind of stood there, and they did all this howling and barking. I didn't turn around because that's when they come after you. I backed up, and then we ran for the car.
And were you attacked at all? I know you mentioned your one dog was nipped.
This one came within about 6-8 feet of me, and I really had to be aggressive and show my teeth, my mouth, and everything to get it kind of like took my leg up and then jumped down like really scary, scary, and that really put it off, and it ran with its tail between its legs. It was the only way that I was going to save myself and the dogs. These are very emboldened coyotes. One of them was, anyways. It must have been the leader of the pack. So thank God I didn't get bit. I hope nothing happens to the coyotes. I was involved in working for the provincial government for natural resources for a really long time, and I saw lots of wildlife and all over the province and everything like that. So I would hate to see them kill them. Yeah.
Do you plan to go back there?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Next time I'll bring a stick.
Brian Grant speaking with the CBC's Josh Crabb about his coyote encounter. The province says the Manitoba Conservation Officer Service logged 335 reported interactions in 2022, that number jumping to 677 in 2023. The province says, though, it's important to note that the majority of those reports are not conflicts involving coyotes, but rather reported sightings.
Ashern, Ericsdale, we want to get to know you a little better. CBC's Communities in Focus is coming to your communities March 18th to 22nd. Come and share the stories of your home with me. I'm Bryce Hoy. Let's get to know each other. Communities in Focus. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
And our team is going to be at the Ericsdale Recreation Centre Cafe from 1 to 6 p.m. today. And tomorrow morning, right here on Information Radio, Marcy Marcusa and Corey Funk will be broadcasting live from Chicken Chef in Ashern. So that's going to be tomorrow morning right here on the program. Just about 44 minutes after 7 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. A song now from Winnipeg singer-songwriter Noah Dirksen. This tune is called You Got a Hold on Me.
We were heading westbound on the road.
where the street meets the sky. I look out and what do I see? But oh, what a world and what it means to be free. Oh, you gotta hold on me. Oh, you gotta hold on me. Oh, you gotta hold. Oh, you gotta hold. Oh, you gotta hold on me. You gotta hold on. Oh, you gotta hold on me. Oh, you gotta hold on me. Oh, you gotta hold. Oh, you gotta hold. Oh, you gotta hold on me. You gotta hold on. Yeah, you gotta hold
Out of Winnipeg, that was Noah Dirksen with You Gotta Hold On Me. Just about 12 minutes before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, everywhere on the CBC Listen app, and of course streaming live on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Our streaming producer Brad Lilly is behind the controls there. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. We did get a phone call on our commuter line from St. Vital Imports, letting us know that on northbound Main, just past Higgins at the single lane left lane there at the underpass there is a stalled vehicle with blinkers on. So be aware of that as you make your way to work or wherever you're driving. If you see other issues, do what St. Vital Imports did and call our listener line. Of course, hands-free and pulled over safe if you can. 2047-883093, 2047-883093. Shauna Forrester-Smith is a 41-year-old woman trying to stay positive and productive while facing a chronic disease. Back in 2011, she was newly married and newly diagnosed with gastroparesis and intestinal pseudo-obstruction. It meant vomiting, multiple surgeries, infertility, and tube feeding. She's a resident of the chronic care unit at Deer Lodge Centre, but her health conditions requires her to take multiple trips to the hospital. But a recent experience at Grace Hospital has her raising concerns about the care she received and is calling for changes to the healthcare system in the form of a blue ribbon campaign. We'll talk more about that shortly. First, though, Shauna joining us on the line. Good morning.
Good morning.
Let's go back to what happened back in March, on March 2nd. Take us through that day.
It was a Saturday. It was March 2nd. I was starting to go septic at Deer Lodge from an infection in my central line. I have a central line because I am fed intravenously. It's called TPN. Mm-hmm. I also receive IV fluids continuously, IV medications. So anyways, I was quite sick. And then in the wee hours of the morning, they started having problems with my blood pressure. I was actually going into shock, so they called an ambulance. and I was taken to the Grace Hospital ER, and what I experienced was just awful.
What did you experience? Well, what was it about that particular experience? Because you have received emergency care before. What made this different?
I've been a frequent flyer of the emergency room for over 15 years, and I've never had an experience like that, and I've never seen anything like that, what I saw in the emergency department. Just the workloads of staff were unsafe. They had more patients than they could safely and competently and effectively care for and properly care for. There were so many people admitted, but we're waiting for beds. Like access block was such an issue. There were so many people on stretchers, crammed into every inch there was space, just waiting in halls and nooks and crannies on stretchers for beds. People were waiting days. I was actually admitted waiting for a bed. They couldn't tell me when I was going to be able to get a bed. I couldn't get medications on time. They couldn't keep up with my pain control. They couldn't even do wound care. I couldn't get even just really basic care. And it wasn't the staff's fault. It was their workload. There wasn't time.
Well, I know you spoke with the staff who cared for you directly, but again, you're saying that you don't blame them. What was your conversation like with the healthcare staff as you raised your concerns?
They were extremely apologetic, and they knew that they weren't providing optimal care. And one nurse even said to me, because I got moved from a room into this area, this holding area for people waiting for beds that was very cramped and where there were a lot of people waiting. And the nurse said to me, she's like, I don't know why they gave you to me. She's like, I have 9 patients. She's like, you're extremely sick. Even if you weren't extremely sick, you have a lot of stuff going on and need a lot of care just on a normal day. And I'm not able to do that. She's like, I don't know what to do. She's like, this is going to be a problem.
When you heard that, how did that make you feel? I mean, you went to the emergency department because you needed emergent care. In hearing that from the nurse, in hearing their description of just how hard working has been, and that may be an understatement, I mean, what did that feel like for you?
I mean, it was frustrating for both of us. I was frustrated. I couldn't get, because I was an emergency, they won't do TPN and emerge. So until I got a bed somewhere, I couldn't get fed. Now I'm fighting a life-threatening infection and I'm getting no nutrition. That's frustrating. I can't get my dressing changed, so my skin's getting destroyed. So that's frustrating. I'm not getting my medication on time. I'm asking for pain medication. It's taking over 3 hours to get it. I'm in pain. That's frustrating. But there's nothing you can do about it, so you're stuck. You're just stuck there. You just have to kind of roll through it. But that's why I decided to start this petition, because we need to do something about these conditions. And this isn't even really about me anymore. This is about all Manitobans. People should expect a certain level of care when they go to the emergency room.
What are you calling for in your petition, Shauna?
What I'm calling for is that number one, that they work on the excessive wait times. Number two, that they work on access block. Now, access block is when patients are admitted, but there's no bed available. So it could be a long-term care bed, it could be a medicine bed, whatever. So so eliminating access block and then improving patient flow. And then the other 3 things are concerning staffing. One is addressing the workload concerns because the workloads are untenable and they're unsafe. The other issue is working on morale and the working conditions, because if they don't address that, they're going to lose more people. They're going to lose the people that they have. And then the big issue is working on addressing the vacancies and the staffing shortages that emerge, and also in tandem, making sure that if they're doing work to retain the staff that they have, because they can't afford to lose more people.
Shauna,
So
when you look at your blue ribbon, because that's also part of your campaign, what comes up for you? What does the blue ribbon represent to you?
the blue ribbon represents, it's code blue in our emergency departments right now. Like we need to resuscitate them. Like they are on death's door, and we need to act now. Like we need interventions and action now before they flatline, because they are going to flatline and things are going to get worse if the government and the WRHA and Shared Health don't start taking these issues seriously and start taking action.
Shauna, thank you for making space to share your story, and do take good care.
Could I share one thing?
Yes.
I have a petition. It's www.change.org/ER code blue. And I encourage all Manitobans to go and sign it and share it with their contacts.
Do take good care.
Thank you.
Shauna Forster-Smith. We did contact the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, and in a statement to CBC, a spokesperson writes, quote, "We continue to work to address these concerns through a variety of initiatives that are underway within the healthcare system, including work to add 36 additional acute care beds at St. Boniface Hospital and 31 new beds at Grace Hospital," unquote. The WRHA also says that investments are being made to expand the number of allied health staff and hospital case coordinators at Winnipeg hospitals. 2.5 minutes before 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1. And to your CBC Winnipeg local news desk now, Heather Wells joining us with a look at news headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the province says fuel trucks have already started moving gas to Winnipeg after a pipeline shut down in Gretna. The Imperial Oil line was shut down on Friday after an inspection by workers raised concerns about a portion of that line's integrity. The government says it is continuing to work with suppliers to maintain gas supply. Now, we're going to hear from a supply chain professor coming up in our next news. And a Nova Scotia truck driver who lost his right foot to a flesh-eating disease is now suing a Winnipeg doctor. We'll hear that story as well coming up in our next local news at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, along with Joni Nicolou and Megan Ketchison. I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. Traffic alert at Sherbrooke and William. There is a stalled transit bus on the eastbound curb lane, so be prepared for that. Drew called us to let us know of a stalled semi-southbound Lajmodiere at Abinogi-Mikana on the left lane. Be aware of that. Lots to come in our next half hour as well. Oh, I should let you know if you see any issues. 204-788-3093, 204-788-3093. Stay tuned. World Report is standing by.
Today on Q with Tom Power.
Evelyn Brochu is working on being funny in another language. She's one of the stars of the new Quebecois-American film French Girl. Evelyn's mainly done dramatic roles in English, but she'll be here to talk about switching to comedy for this film and how she learned English watching The Fresh Prince.
Wait a minute, I'm getting the names. This guy, this is Carlton, this is Hillary. Okay, I got this.
That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdel Mahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcast.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
The internet is out in parts of Africa, and people in Ghana and other countries are worried for their businesses and everyday lives. How the big undersea fiber optic cables that keep people online were damaged and how to better protect them. It's coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. It's not clear if today's Newfoundland Labrador budget will go ahead as planned. Protesters are blocking government employees, media, and politicians from entering the provincial legislature. Fish harvesters want the government to open markets to outside buyers. As it stands, they can only sell their catches to buyers inside the province at a union-negotiated price. Police on horseback have been pushing back the protesters, trying to disperse the crowd. At least one protester was injured and taken away on a stretcher. The public is being warned to expect traffic delays in the area. There are more questions about the motion the House of Commons passed on Canada's response to the Israel-Hamas war. It was amended just minutes before the vote. And we're still trying to clarify the language around one key sticking point, the export of military goods to Israel. The CBC's Janice McGregor joins me now from our Parliamentary Bureau. And Janice, this was an NDP motion, but there were some big amendments from the Liberals. Where did they land on defense exports?
The government's claimed for months that it hasn't issued any new export permits, particularly for lethal military technologies, since October 7th. But organizations that track shipments from Canadian companies like Project Plowshares believe that, in fact, nearly $30 million in exports for Israel's military have continued to flow because the export control system doesn't actually distinguish between lethal and non-lethal permits, particularly for dual-use technologies like circuit boards, antenna systems, even vehicles. Activists have protested across Canada outside the private companies that continue to profit from these exports. The wording change that they hammered out at the last minute on Monday night, New Democrats think, should shut this down. But could the government now be liable for breaking private contracts? MP Heather McPherson said last night on Power and Politics it would be worth the risk of being sued if that means saving civilian lives.
There is no scenario in which I believe Canadians are interested in hearing a story about liability issues against 13,000 killed children.
If Israel's military operation is ultimately found to be at risk of perpetuating a genocide against Palestinians, activists continue to argue that continuing any kind of defense exports makes Canada complicit.
There are some members of the Liberal caucus who did not support this motion, even with the amendments. Why is that?
Well, MPs like Anthony Housefather have been pleading with colleagues to understand why it was still very harmful to Israel's cause.
Essentially what we're saying is that Iran will continue to ship weapons to Hamas and Hezbollah in the north, and those terrorist organizations will fire on Israel. And if everybody followed what, that motion suggested that Canada do, Israel would have no ability to respond.
Housefather, of course, one of three Liberals who voted no on Monday night. He says he's continuing to reflect on what to do next.
Thank you, Janice.
You're welcome.
The CBC's Janice McGregor in Ottawa. A federal appeals court has put a controversial Texas law on hold. SB 4 would allow law enforcement to arrest anyone they suspect of being in the state illegally. It would also give judges the power to deport people to Mexico despite their nationalities. The bill was given the go-ahead by the Supreme Court yesterday, but last night it was stopped. The CBC's Alex Panetta joins me now from Washington. And Alex, what is going on here?
Legal whiplash, that's what's going on, all over a fundamental question, and that's who's in charge of the national border, the federal government or the states? And that issue has placed the United States government on a constitutional collision course with the state of Texas. This law imposes state penalties for entering the U.S. illegally. It's aimed at migrants who right now can walk into the U.S., declare asylum, then stay in the U.S. for years while they fight their case. So Texas says, we'll deal with this ourselves. The law allows police in Texas to demand people's immigration papers. If the police see evidence that a person entered illegally, they can be jailed for 6 months for a first offense and up to 20 years for a second offense. Then when they're out of prison, the police have to take them back to the border and deport them. The federal government says you can't do that. And Texas says, well, the Constitution gives us, the state, special powers, war-like powers if we're being invaded. So what happened yesterday in the span of a few hours was this judicial back and forth. The Supreme Court allowed the law to take effect, at least for now, while the case is being fought in lower courts. Then suddenly, late last night, a federal appeals court reimposed a different injunction delaying the law.
So what's next?
This morning, an appeals court will hear new oral arguments about what to do with the current injunction, while that case continues to be fought on its substance. probably back to the Supreme Court. In the meantime, there's uncertainty for millions of people. In a dissenting opinion yesterday, some of the Supreme Court's liberal justices said this law means chaos and crisis in immigration enforcement. Meanwhile, Mexico's not happy. It responded to yesterday's news saying it's not going to accept deportations from Texas, that Mexico deals with federal law, not state law.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
The CBC's Alex Panetta in Washington. Ireland's Prime Minister Leo Varadkar is stepping down.
After 7 years in office, I don't feel I'm the best person for that job anymore.
Varadkar says he will resign as Prime Minister and party leader as soon as a successor is chosen. His government recently suffered a major blow. Twin referendums proposing to update old-fashioned language in the Constitution were rejected. Ireland's next general election will be 2025. Canada's legal cannabis industry is looking for more ways to draw in customers. Sales across the country have plateaued, so licensed producers and retailers want provinces to help by loosening restrictions on collaborations. The CBC's Mike Crawley explains.
With Canada's legal cannabis market still relatively new, customers' shopping habits are still evolving.
We don't have fans of brands as of yet.
Shakir Tayabali runs the Independent Retail Cannabis Collective, representing more than 750 pot shops across Canada.
Most people that walk into an alcohol store typically know what they want to buy before they walk in, whereas in a cannabis retail store, that isn't the same.
All provinces but Saskatchewan restrict direct financial relationships between cannabis retailers and producers. It means they can't make deals to hold in-store promotional events, such as sampling or special displays. The industry is pushing provinces to change that. Keenan Pascal is CEO of Token Naturals, a licensed producer in Edmonton.
Allow us to have those same store relationships that, a Budweiser could have with a liquor store. That's really what we're looking for.
Alberta's cannabis regulator is reviewing that province's retail rules, including in-store promotions. An official told CBC News the agency will look at possible policy changes in the coming months. Meanwhile, the Ontario Chamber of Commerce is asking Doug Ford's government to lift its ban on producers and retailers collaborating. Mike Crawley, CBC News, Toronto.
Unhappiness is a growing concern amongst young people in Canada and the United States. The annual World Happiness Report shows Canada slipped from 13th to 15th place, and for the first time, the U.S. has dropped out of the top 20 spots. Researchers say it's due to a big drop in the sense of well-being for those under the age of 30. Nordic nations like Finland, Denmark, Iceland, and Sweden all took the top happiness spots. So you're stuck in the airport, your flight is not happening as planned, and you're getting no help from the desk. Do you go public with your frustration on social media? Be cautious. Scammers are increasingly using social media to target frustrated travelers. Peter Cowan has that story.
Joanne Galarno tweeted out her frustration when her flight home to St. John's was delayed. She got lots of replies of people wanting to help, claiming to be with Air Canada.
I was social media aware enough to look at their profiles and realized that even though they had the Air Canada logo, they had, saying that they were supervisors, that they didn't have any followers. So that triggered some alarm bells for me.
Airlines like Air Canada, WestJet, and Porter often do reach out to frustrated customers to help resolve travel troubles. But now, scammers are doing it too. Galarno knew the profiles were fake, but she was curious. After giving her booking reference and name, the scammers found her phone number and told her to install an international money transfer app to collect her compensation in Kenyan shillings. She worries that travelers who are less savvy might follow through.
When you have flight cancellations and you have these stressful situations, individuals are just willing to, have anyone help them that they can.
The Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre says it doesn't have reports of people losing money through this type of scam, but it says social media is now involved in 75% of the scams reported to them. Spokesperson Jeff Horncastle says stressed out travelers are vulnerable.
So automatically fraudsters are going to try to capitalize on that situation.
Air Canada says it's aware of the issue and the company reports fake accounts. It says customers should make sure they're only interacting with its verified account. Peter Cowan, CBC News, St. John's.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Maligayang umaga. Magandang umaga. Good morning, Manitoba. Faith Fundal here, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. May McKillop is on the controls. Our streaming producer, Brad Lilly, is also on the controls as we stream live on our CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. And Abby Adiemi is our director. He'll be back shortly here. In this half hour of the program, our mental health columnist takes a look at the mental health benefits of gardening. First, though, we've heard many stories surrounding youth and crime in this city, as well as the need for better training for those who look after kids in children and family services care. We're going to have a conversation with Manitoba's Minister of Families, Nahanni Fontaine, for her reaction coming up next. Stay tuned. First, though, to our CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Heather Wells joining us now. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg woman who lives with chronic illness is calling on the province to reduce ER wait times and fix healthcare staffing shortages. Shauna Forrester-Smith started a petition after a 3-day stay at Grace Hospital, which she describes as awful. An inconvenience, not a disaster. That is what a supply chain professor calls the shutdown of an Imperial Oil pipeline between Gretna and Winnipeg. Robert Parsons at the Asper School of Business says people shouldn't panic. The pipeline was shut down Friday after workers identified a strain on the portion of the line near St. Adolphe. The province says fuel trucks have already started moving gas into Winnipeg. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk, along with Joni Nicolou and Megan Ketchison there as well. Abby Adiemi is back here in Studio 15 at Portageon's Fence. Good morning. Happy International Happiness Day.
I wish you happiness, my friend.
Thank you.
And everybody listening, me also. Currently, Winnipeg, it's a chilly -15 under clear skies. Now, that's quite cold, I'll tell you. For folks out there, make sure you bundle up and you keep yourself as warm as you can as you head out this morning. Today's weather's outlook actually shows a promising start with sunny skies. However, as the day progresses, we should be expecting a mix of sun and clouds rolling in. Now, the high for today will be -9 degrees with gentle northwest wind becoming light in the afternoon. But here is the kicker, folks. The wind chill will actually feel like -25 this morning, and then it's going to dive down to like -16. So don't let the sunshine you'd see fool you. But as we move into the night period, expect partly cloudy conditions to crawl in, and then it's going to clear the skies close to the midnight period. The high for today, once again, is a -9. Now, a couple of things to mention in traffic. Before the news, we told you about that stalled car with its flashes on, northbound Main, just past the Higgins Bridge on the single left lane at the underpass. You need to be careful as you pass that area. And then one at Sherbrooke and William. There's a stalled transit bus there, the eastbound curb lane. You also need to take care as you approach that area. And at Abenurjimikina and Island Shore, there's a collision there. The eastbound median lane is blocked. So you might want to take care because this is rush hour. And I know that part of the city can be very busy for those either going west or coming north. So you might want, that's the eastbound median lane. You need to take it easy. See anything in traffic? Let us know. 788-3093.
Minutes after 8 o'clock here on CBC Radio 1, I'm Faith Fundal. As you've been hearing as part of our ongoing series on youth and violence, there is a growing call for more resources to help foster parents and caregivers in group homes. Stems from Police Chief Jenny Smyth's comments last week about violent crimes being committed by young people in children and family services care. On the program yesterday, Marcy Marcusa spoke with a former foster kid who aged out of the CFS system and what that experience was like for her. Here is some of what Christy Bolio had to say.
You're a child, you don't stop aging, right? So you're going to get to that point where eventually you can't worry about that anymore, right? You need to worry about putting a roof over your head and keeping that roof over your head. So there's just a lot of things that I think that we miss out on when we're being transitioned from home to home.
And if you're worrying about the roof over your head and a support system that gets you,
where is your time for childhood in terms of, not worrying?
There is no time for childhood. Like, I would say that a good portion of my teenage years were devoted to figuring out how to sustain life on my own.
That is the voice of Carly Bolio speaking with Information Radio host Marcy Marcusa on the program yesterday. On the line right now is Manitoba's Minister of Families, Accessibility and Gender Equity, Nahanni Fontaine. Good morning.
Good morning, Faith.
In listening to what Carly had to say there, what comes up for you?
Listen, what I know to be true is that child welfare has not always been the most responsive, and certainly has a lot of work to do to ensure that we are creating the most safe and reconciliatory path forward to adulthood and for all of the children that are in our care. I know exactly what he's talking about. I myself was once a child in care. Minister Smith was once a child in care. And so we certainly understand and have that lived experience in respect of child welfare and some of the things that children navigate. And certainly since I took on the role of and responsibility of families minister, it has been my number one priority to decolonize child welfare and to look at how we need to respond to some of the challenges that we're facing in the communities and in families, and certainly across Manitoba.
And she mentions many of those things that you've acknowledged. Can you talk more about what has been taken or what steps are being taken to support the staff who look after folks like Carly?
Yeah, our government, and I would suggest that all Manitobans want what's best for our children, right? Children that are in care, children that are not in care. This is the next generation of Manitobans. And so certainly our government is focused on providing the best homes, the safe homes for children and youth that come into care, into child welfare. We are working with Indigenous leadership, certainly foster parents, community members, and certainly even members from other parties. Just a little while ago, I can't remember exactly, maybe 5 or 6 weeks ago, I actually met with the Manitoba Foster Parent Association. I heard directly their concerns. And as I said, since I came into this role, child welfare has been one of my number one priorities. And in that, we're moving towards transferring jurisdiction of child welfare to Indigenous communities, Indigenous nations. And in that, one of the things that we're doing is we're also moving towards customary and kinship care, right? There has been for years and years, family members that have taken on the responsibility of having their grandchildren or their nieces or their nephews. And the system hasn't provided any financial support to those families. And so we know that children do best when they are in community, when they're with their families, when they're with the broader community. And so certainly, as I said earlier, we're looking to decolonize the system and move more towards customary and kinship care and away from stranger-based care. Having said that, I, as the minister responsible, fully understand and appreciate and honor the work that foster parents do, that group homes do in keeping our children safe. It is a sacred responsibility. Anybody that takes on that work, I have the utmost respect for and appreciation for.
Part of why we're having this conversation is because of what Winnipeg Police Service Chief Danny Smythe said about youth violence in our city. And in his framing, his comments talked about the need for better training for those who look after kids in care. In the work that you're doing, that you've just described of what you're trying to accomplish, how might that impact then youth violence and particularly the training that Chief Smythe is calling for?
Yeah. So I, along everyone else in Manitoba, understand that, when we see violence in our communities, it's always concerning, right? We want the best for our communities. We want the best for our province. I want to point out, and I want to be sure that folks understand as well that not every child or youth in care is out there getting in conflict with the law. In fact, I would submit that the vast majority of children and youth who are in care are not getting in conflict with the law and are actually thriving and doing well given the circumstances, right? I want to be very careful when, I hear comments that kind of paint all children in care with the same brush. It contributes to anti-Indigenous sentiment, and particularly anti-Indigenous sentiment against our children and our youth. And so, I acknowledge the chief of police, his concern in respect of, perhaps a lack of resources for and training for foster parents in group homes. And certainly that's a concern for me. But I also know that Chief Smythe, when he held his news conference, he didn't have all the facts in front of him. And so I want to be sure that when we are discussing this issue, that we're looking at it within its totality. And that is to say that the vast majority of youth that are in care, children and youth that are in care, are not in conflict with the law.
As part of the systemic changes that you're looking to make, and as you look at the big picture, what commitments can you make about how the changes that you might make, if any, for example, regulating group homes or changing the way the foster system, foster parent system, or CFS system works? Are you able to make any commitments about what you will be changing?
Yeah. So first off, I want to be explicitly clear that, again, my priority as minister responsible is the decolonizing the system, right? This system has been going on for generations, so much so that we have two members of our cabinet that were once children in care. And so my priority is to decolonize child welfare. And that is to say that, along with the absolute support of the Premier, we're moving towards transferring jurisdiction of child welfare to where it rightfully belongs in our communities, with our leadership and our families and our culture and our nations. And so we are actively engaged in those discussions with leadership across Manitoba to be an equal partner in that jurisdiction transfer. In the meantime, and as I said earlier, we're moving towards customary and kinship care. As well, we're taking a whole of government approach, right? We're working across government to address a variety of different needs that we need. So, for instance, improving mental health supports for youth that are in conflict with the law. Right now, we're looking at hiring a missing persons coordinator to work directly with the Winnipeg Police Service to help address some of the safety concerns that are faced by vulnerable children in care. We're working with justice on culturally appropriate interventions and much, much more. And I want to just say this as well. During our campaign, the Premier made it explicitly clear that his commitment and our commitment as a government is to ensure that more children make it to their 18th birthday and beyond. And in that commitment is the full knowledge and understanding and commitment to children in care. That we are creating a province where every child has the opportunity to live their best life, to be safe, to be surrounded by their culture and love, and to walk walk on this path of adulthood with what the resources that we need or that they need. One of the things that we're looking at in our department as well is those resources for youth that are aging out of care. We know that many times, children aging out of care, it's a pipeline to homelessness. And so those are the things that we're looking at in a very comprehensive way. And I can assure Manitobans and listeners that I with no exaggeration, every single day, we have my department and my amazing team that I work with have multiple meetings every single day on child welfare and how we can decolonize it and ensure that we're prioritizing our youth and our children that are in the system.
I just wanted to ask as well, because I'm not sure if I heard it. When it comes to group homes, is that part of what you're looking at? Might we see different regulations by the province when it comes to group homes? Is that part of it?
Again, as we move towards jurisdiction, again, when First Nation communities and Indigenous communities, Métis communities have control, the care and control over their children in respect of child welfare, we'll be looking to them to see the infrastructure that they want to have in place. And I imagine that would include some group home or transitional housing for children that are aging out of care. We're looking at all of it. It's an infrastructure of child welfare, and all of it works together. And we've got to really, the direction that I've given is really to map out what are the gaps that we have within the system, and how do we mitigate those gaps, and how do we ensure that children and youth are well protected. And certainly group homes are one of those within, this infrastructure of child welfare. But again, I really want to impress on folks that Manitoba, in 4 or 5 years from now, child welfare is going to look very different in Manitoba and, in fact, across the country as other jurisdictions move towards transferring child welfare to Indigenous leadership. And we're on this path of reconciliation. And so, it's actually an exciting time to look at where we're going to be going with child welfare here in Manitoba and across the country that best protects and suits the needs of our children and tries to rectify some of the harm that the system has imposed for generations.
Nahanni Fontaine, Manitoba's Minister of Families, Accessibility and Gender Equity. Thank you for making time today, and take good care.
Miigwech, thank you.
CBC's Communities in Focus is back. Ashern and Eriksdale, we want to get to know you a little better. I'm Bryce Hoy, and I'm in your communities this week to find out what they're all about. So come and share the stories of your home with yours truly. Let's get to know each other. Communities in Focus. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for more.
Thanks very much, Bryce. And our team, including Bryce Hoy and Nadia Kidwai, are going to be at the Eriksdale Recreation Centre Cafe today from 1 to 6 p.m. Again, that's at the Eriksdale Recreation Centre Cafe from 1 to 6 p.m. And Information Radio host Marcy Marcusa and studio director Corey Funk are going to be at Chicken Chef in Ashern tomorrow to broadcast live the program here on CBC Radio 1. They'll be there from 6 to just about 9 a.m. at Chicken Chef in Ashern, so be sure to come by and say hello. I know they changed the time to be able to, the place there changed their business hours to accommodate that. So tune in to Marcy Marcusa, Information Radio host, and Corey Funk, studio director here on the program for a live broadcast at Chicken Chef in Ashern. You are listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and everywhere on the CBC Listen app. Coming up on The Current later this morning, CBC News chief political correspondent Adrienne Arsenault has spent the past several days in the Middle East. She's had Canadian exclusive access, onboard flights dropping aid and taking gravely injured Gazans to Qatar for medical treatment. She's going to walk Matt Galloway through what she's seen. That's on The Current. Coming up here on the program on CBC Radio 1 just after this program, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, and of course everywhere on the CBC Listen app. If you missed parts of the show, you can tune into the CBC Listen app for more. Just search for Information Radio. And of course the full show, and hello as well to the folks watching on the CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Our streaming producer is Brad Lillies behind the controls. May McKillop is behind the radio controls. Abby Adeyemi is our director. If you see other issues as you make your commute to work or wherever you're going, call our commuter line 2047-883-093, 2047-883-093. We'll let you know coming up after your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, definitely not spring-like. Minus 15 in Winnipeg right now. We're going to see some clouds move in later this afternoon. A high of minus 9 for this first full day of spring. A Winnipeg woman has started a petition to improve health care in Manitoba after a recent stay at Grace Hospital. Shauna Forrester-Smith lives with chronic illness. She was taken to the Grace with a life-threatening infection. She says she stayed 3 days in a crammed emergency department before going back to Deer Lodge Centre where she lives. Forrester-Smith says she was stuck in the ER because there were no available hospital beds.
There were too many patients, and there just wasn't enough time, and there wasn't enough staff, and the ER was just completely overwhelmed. And I had never seen anything like that or experienced anything like that or had care that was that unsafe.
A WRHA spokesperson says it shares some of her concerns. The health authority says it is adding more acute care beds and allied health staff to allow for patient discharges 7 days a week. A supply chain professor is calling the shutdown of a pipeline in southern Manitoba an inconvenience and says people shouldn't panic. Imperial Oil shut down its pipeline from Gretna to Winnipeg on Friday after workers identified a strain on a portion of the line near St. Adolphe. The company says replacing that section will take about 3 months. The province says fuel trucks have already started moving gas into Winnipeg. Robert Parsons at the Asper School of Business says this shutdown shows the monitoring system is working the way it's supposed to.
It is not a disaster. It is an inconvenience. And I think that is the critical thing. This is an inconvenience. It is a manageable inconvenience.
Parsons says there's no need to panic about shortages and urges Manitobans not to stockpile gasoline because he says it is volatile and it could be dangerous. A Nova Scotia truck driver who lost his foot to a flesh-eating disease is now suing a Winnipeg doctor. Christopher Miners was diagnosed with necrotizing fasciitis and had his foot amputated in Nova Scotia. But the 54-year-old says that could have been avoided had he received better care in Winnipeg. Miners stopped at Seven Oaks Hospital during a drive across the country in 2022. He alleges negligence by a doctor at the hospital caused the loss of his right foot. He is now suing for damages such as loss of income, costs of care, and loss of homemaking capacity. None of the allegations have been tested in court. Well, Brian Mulrooney spends his final hours lying in state today in Ottawa. Between 9 this morning and 1 this afternoon, well-wishers can view the casket of the former Prime Minister at the Sir John A. Macdonald Building opposite Parliament Hill. Hundreds of people, including current and former politicians, streamed through the ballroom yesterday to pay their respects. Animal Justice and the Winnipeg Humane Society are calling for an end to the calf scramble and sheep wrangling at the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair. The events see kids chase, wrestle, and tie the animals. The groups say they cause stress and hurt the animals. The Provincial Exhibition of Manitoba runs the Royal Manitoba Winter Fair. General Manager Mark Humphreys says the kids will not be abusing animals. Humphreys says events like the Barnyard Challenge show people what life on the farm is like. He adds these accusations hurt agriculture.
What we're trying to do is re-establish that connection between city and rural and educate as we go. One of our things that we love to shout from the rooftops is that we're here, our doors are open, you know where we are, but sadly these always operate from the shadows and come out with guns firing, which is a little sad.
The Winter Fair starts on Monday. As of now, Humphreys says the Barnyard Challenge and sheep wrangling will go ahead. And just in time for International Happiness Day, this year's ranking of the world's happiest people is out, and it lists Finland as being the country with the happiest population. It's the 7th year in a row Finland has come out at number 1. Canada is ranked 15th, which is 2 spots lower than last year. And for the first time in the history of this poll, the United States is out of the top 20. It has fallen to number 23. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Heather, I've already said this to the folks here on the program, but I enjoy working with you because whether or not I'm happy, I always feel happiness when I get to work with you folks.
Oh, that is so nice.
So
you make so many people happy, Faith.
I guess, is that like a requirement because my last name is Fundal?
That...
do you get it? Okay, never
That's
mind.
good. I like it.
Never mind.
It makes me happy.
We'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Heather Wells from your CBC Winnipeg local news desk. Joni Nicolou is there as well. Megan Ketchison, Jeff Stapleton, a bunch of folks here working with us. Hello and goodbye to the folks on the CBC Manitoba YouTube stream. Brad Lillies has been our streaming producer today. May McKillop on the controls. Abby Adeyemi is our director. Hello.
I'd say you made me happy by just saying fun.
we have fun here on the program.
Anyways,
it's serious, but it's fun.
Something to make commuters happy right now. That's stalled transit bus at Sherbrooke and William is now cleared, so it's going to be smooth sailing, but you might still have a bit of backlog. The issue on Abano, Jamaican and Island Shore is still there. That's the collision eastbound median lane. It's still blocked, so take care along that exit. Winnipeg today, we're going to see we're currently at -15. We have sunshine, get you going. Winnipeg, Brandon, Dauphin, Gimli, Steinbach, and Morris all at -9 degrees later today. And Thompson is at -16, dropping to frigid -22 in Churchill.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'm Faith Fundal in for Marcy Marcusa. A reminder that they will be broadcasting live from Chicken Chef in Ashern tomorrow morning, so stay tuned for that. Mag-ingat po kayo and take good care wherever you are. Thanks for listening. The Current is standing by. I'm Faith Fundal.